Welcome to The Explainer. If you're learning French, you've probably hit that point. You know the one. You feel kind of stuck, you can get by, you can have conversations, but you're just not fluent. Well, today we're going to talk about that B2 plateau and, more importantly, how you can finally push past it. So does this sound like you can get through most conversations, you understand what people are saying, but it just feels like your progress has flatlined? Your French is good, no doubt, but you know it could be great. If you're nodding along right now, don't worry, you are in exactly the right place. So this feeling, it actually has a name, the B2 plateau. It's that really tricky stage where your French works, for sure, but it's just missing that nuance, that natural flow that native speakers have. Let's dig into what that really means. Okay, first things first. This is a completely normal part of learning a language. Everyone hits this wall. And the secret to breaking through it isn't about learning 1,000 new words. No, it's about going back and fine-tuning the skills you already have, especially those little errors that have become baked-in habits. So how do we start fine-tuning? Well, we have to diagnose the problem first, right? So let's play detective and look at 3 super common grammar traps that keep B2 learners from really sounding fluent. We're talking about tricky agreements, those pesky prepositions, and of course, tense confusion. These are the kinds of subtle things that might not break a conversation, but they make your French sound just a little bit off to a native ear. Nailing these is a huge step towards sounding way more natural. All right, let's tackle these head on. We're going to use a really simple but super powerful technique, putting the common mistake right next to the correct natural version. Seeing them side by side like this really helps make the right way just click. First up, the all-time classic French challenge, agreements. Making sure everything in your sentence lines up perfectly with gender and number. This is where so many of those small but really noticeable errors tend to creep in. Okay, look really closely here. The only difference is one tiny little E at the end of acheter. So what's the deal with that? Well, it comes down to a specific rule in the passé composé. When the thing you're talking about, in this case, la nouvelle voiture, comes before the verb, that verb has to agree with it. It's a tiny detail, I know, but it makes a massive difference in how accurate you sound. Let's move on to our second trap, prepositions. You know, those tricky little words like de, and pour. They're small, yeah, but using the wrong one can totally change what you're trying to say, or at best, just make your sentence sound a little clunky. This is such a great example of how our brains can trick us. You think, well, it's aller à Paris, so it must be visiter à Paris too, right? But nope. The verb visiter doesn't need any help. It connects directly to the place you're visiting. No preposition needed. It's a subtle shift, but it immediately makes you sound more like a native speaker. And for our third and final trap, let's talk about tense confusion. This is a big one, especially when you're choosing between past tenses like the imparfait versus the passé composé. One is for setting the scene, and the other is for specific actions. So what's going on here? If you say il a plu, you're treating the rain like a single, finished event, like it started and stopped in a flash. But that's not the idea, is it? The rain was the background setting for when you went out. So you need the imparfait to paint that picture, il pleuvait. That describes the ongoing situation, while je suis sorti is the specific thing that happened during that time. Okay, so we've looked at a few specific grammar fixes. But you know, these mistakes aren't just random. They're usually symptoms of a much bigger habit, translating directly from English in your head. To really truly break through this plateau, we gotta go deeper than just grammar. We need to shift how we think. This quote says it all, really. This is the goal. True fluency isn't about being a perfect, walking, talking translator of your own thoughts. It's about breaking that habit and just expressing yourself directly, using the building blocks that French gives you. You know, when you translate word for word, you can create a sentence that is grammatically okay, but to a native speaker, it just sounds clunky and unnatural. It doesn't have that smooth, fluid sound. Honestly, learning to adopt French ways of phrasing ideas is maybe the biggest key to unlocking that next level of fluency. This is a perfect example. I am excited translates word for word to je suis excité, but a French person would almost never say that in this context. Instead, they'd use this fantastic expression j'ai hâte de, which literally means something like I have haste to. It captures the exact same feeling of excitement, but it does it in a completely authentically French way. All right, that's enough theory. Let's get our hands dirty and actually put this stuff into practice. It's time to test your instincts. So, I'm going to show you 3 sentences, and each one has a blank space. Thinking about what we've just covered, see if you can fill them in. Just take a moment and give it your best shot. Okay, got your answers in mind? Let's go through them. For number 1, the answer is sont. Why? Because les fleurs is plural. Simple as that. For the second one, it's su réussit à son examen. The verb réussir just goes with the preposition à. And for number 3, the answer is nous allions. That phrase, chaque été, every summer, tells us it was a repeated habit in the past, and for that, we need the imparfait. So how did you do? So what's the big takeaway here? Breaking out of this plateau isn't about making some giant leap forward overnight. It's about all the small, consistent improvements you make every single day. So I'll leave you with this question. What's one small change you're going to make to your French today? Maybe you'll just focus on double-checking your agreements, or maybe you'll try to use j'ai hâte just once. That one small step, that's your breakthrough. Thanks for joining this explainer.
All right, let's talk French. For so many of us who've reached an advanced level, there's always that one final boss, that last grammatical mountain to climb. And you know what I'm talking about, the subjunctive. Well, today, we're going to give you the tools to finally conquer that beast for good. I mean, if you're at a C1 level, you've already done the heavy lifting. You've got the vocabulary, the complex sentence structures, but the subjunctive, it can still feel like a bit of a mystery, can't it? It's like you know the rules, but getting the feel for it, the when and the why, that's the tricky part. So let's think of this as the key that's going to unlock that final level of fluency for you.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the big one, the certainty versus doubt divide. Then we'll look at some automatic triggers, total lifesavers. After that, we'll build the past subjunctive, see how mood can totally change the meaning of a sentence, and finally, we'll test your mastery. Simple as that.
All right, let's dive into our first section, the certainty/doubt divide. And honestly, this is the master key. I want you to forget about memorizing a million different phrases for just a second. Because if you can really, truly grasp this one core concept, you are basically 80% of the way there. This is it. Okay, so it really all boils down to this fundamental split. You've got 2 teams. On one side, you have the indicative. Think of this as the mood of certainty, of reality, of objective facts. It's what you use when you're stating something you believe is true. Then, on the other side, you have the subjunctive. This is the mood of doubt, subjectivity, opinions, and emotions. You're not stating a fact, you're expressing your personal take on something.
That's exactly it. The subjunctive is the mood of uncertainty. It's basically the language of your inner world, you know? It's for expressing what you want, what you're worried about, what you doubt, what you think is necessary. It's not about describing the world as it is, it's all about describing the world as it could be, or should be, or maybe just how you wish it would be.
Okay, so getting the vibe of the subjunctive is the master key, for sure. But the good news is, French also gives us some amazing shortcuts. Think of these as automatic triggers, the non-negotiables. These are the phrases that just take all the guesswork right out of the equation.
So check these out. Conjunctions like bien que and quoique, they both mean although, or prouve que, which means provided that. As soon as you see one of these, that's your signal. Ding, ding, ding. Your brain should just automatically switch into subjunctive mode. No thinking required. It's like a freebie from the grammar gods. You gotta love it.
All right, let's move on to building the past subjunctive. So what happens when you want to talk about doubts or feelings about something that's already in the past? Well, that's exactly what the past subjunctive is for. I know, it sounds kind of intimidating, but trust me, it's way more straightforward than you think. It's really just a logical, step-by-step process. It's literally a simple 3-step recipe. Step 1, pick your helper verb, either avoir or être, just like you always do for the passé composé. No surprises there. Step 2, and this is the only new part, you take that helper verb and you put it in the present subjunctive. Then step 3, you just tack on the past participle of your main verb, which, hey, you already know how to do. That's it. Let's look at an example.
Here we go. Je doute qu'il soit venu. Let's break it down. The phrase je doute que, I doubt that, that's our trigger for the subjunctive, right? We're talking about something in the past, he came, so we need the past subjunctive. The main verb is venir, and that one takes être. So what's the present subjunctive of être for il? It's soit. Then you just add the past participle venu. Put it all together, soit venu. See? It's just pure logic, step by step.
Okay, this next part is where things get really cool, in my opinion. We've gone over the rules, we've looked at the mechanics, now let's talk about the artistry. This is where you, as a speaker, get to wield the subjunctive like a tool to add all this incredible nuance and subtlety to what you're saying.
Okay, let's look at this first sentence. Je cherche un tuteur qui connaît le subjonctif. Notice the verb here, connaît. That's the indicative. By using the indicative, you're basically stating a fact. You're saying, this tutor exists, and I am looking for him. Maybe you've got a specific person in mind. You're looking for the tutor who knows the subjunctive.
But now, look at this next one. Je cherche un tuteur qui connaisse le subjonctif. The only thing we changed was that one verb ending, from connaître to connaisse. But wow, the entire meaning just shifted. Now you're expressing uncertainty. You're searching for a tutor, any tutor who might have this skill. You're hoping they exist, but you're not sure. It's not a search for a real person anymore. It's a search for an ideal.
So just think about that for a second. With one tiny little change to a verb, you've completely altered the reality of your sentence. You've gone from stating a cold, hard fact to expressing a wish or a hope. That, right there, is the power of the subjunctive. It gives you this incredible precision in your communication.
All right, you've seen the theory, you've seen the mechanics, you've even seen the artistry. So now I think it's your turn. Let's put all this new knowledge to the test with a couple of quick challenges. You ready? Let's do it.
Okay, first one up. Bien que tu, and the verb is être, fatigué, tu dois finir. So what do you think? Take a look at that first part of the sentence. What's the trigger word there, and what mood does it demand? And the answer is soit. It's the subjunctive. And why? Well, remember what we talked about in section 2? Bien que is one of those automatic, non-negotiable triggers. If you see it, you use the subjunctive. Simple as that. Okay, you ready for the next one? Here it is. Je suis sûr qu'il. And the verb is pouvoir. Le faire. So what's the feeling here? What is that first phrase expressing? Is it certainty or is it doubt? The correct answer is peut, using the indicative. And the key is that phrase right at the beginning. Je suis sûr que. I am sure that. That is an expression of pure 100% certainty. And as we learned from our #1 master rule, when you've got certainty, you use the indicative. So what's the big takeaway from all of this? I really want you to stop thinking of the subjunctive as just another boring verb chart you have to memorize. It's not. It is a super sophisticated tool that lets you express exactly what you're feeling. Your doubts, your hopes, your judgments. It's how you share your unique perspective on the world.
So there you have it. The final boss, maybe not so scary after all, right? You now have the keys to use the subjunctive not just correctly, but with real artistry. So the only question I have for you is, what kind of new, subtle meanings are you going to express in your very next French conversation?
Hey everyone, and welcome. So you want to make your French sound, well, more French, right? More sophisticated, more precise, and a whole lot more native-like. If that's you, then you've absolutely come to the right place. Today, we are going to dive into advanced relative clauses. Trust me, this is the secret sauce that's going to level up your language skills for real. All right, let's jump right in with a little challenge. How would you say this in French? The chair on which I'm sitting is old. Yeah, if you're kind of stuck there, don't worry, that is totally normal. You've probably realized that your go-to words, qui and que, they just don't work here. And that little puzzle is exactly what we're here to solve today. So here's our game plan for today. First, we'll talk about why que and coup aren't always enough. Then we'll introduce our new favorite tool, lequel. After that, we'll get into some really cool power-ups with prepositions. We'll also look at the big difference between formal and spoken French. And finally, it's going to be your turn to practice. Let's get started. All right, section 1, beyond que and k. Let's talk about why we even need more tools. I mean, you've probably gotten really comfortable with k, maybe even don't. And that's awesome. But the game changes when you start using prepositions. That's when you realize you need to upgrade your toolkit. So here's the core issue, the main rule we have to deal with. Simply put, you just can't stick a preposition like sur, avec, or pour right in front of qui or que. It's a no-go in French grammar. So if you want to say something a bit more complex, like the topic about which we spoke or the reason for which he left, well, you need a whole new key to unlock that kind of sentence. Okay, so what is that key? Let's get into level 1 and meet lequel.
This is your new go-to tool for precision. Seriously, think of this as the start of your grammar upgrade, the thing that's going to let you build all those awesome, complex sentences you've been trying to make. So, what does lequel actually do? Well, at its heart, it's basically the hero that swoops in whenever a preposition is left hanging, looking for a partner. Its number one job is to add clarity. It points a big, shiny arrow directly at the noun you're talking about, so there's absolutely no confusion. Now here's where things get really cool. Lequel is a bit of a chameleon. It actually changes its form to match the gender and number of the noun it's replacing. So you've got 4 versions to work with, as you can see here. For masculine singular things, it's lequel. For feminine singular, laquelle. And for the plurals, you've got lesquels for masculine and lesquelles for feminine. Simple as that.
Okay, let's bring this back to our very first example to see it in action. Remember the chair on which I'm sitting? The French is voici la chaise sur laquelle je suis assis. Let's break that down. The noun is la chaise, right? That's feminine and singular. So we need the feminine singular form of our pronoun, which is laquelle. You put it right after the preposition sur, and boom, sur laquelle. See how perfectly that just clicks into place? Okay, you've mastered level 1. Are you ready to level up? Welcome to level 2, the power-ups. This is where things get really, really elegant. We're going to talk about these special contractions, auquel and duquel, which pop up when we're dealing with the prepositions a and de. You see, in the world of French prepositions, a and de are basically celebrities. They get special treatment. They don't just stand next to lequel. No, they actually fuse with it. They merge together to create one single smooth word. And if this sounds weird, it's really not. It's the exact same logic that turns a plus le into o. It's just a natural shortcut to make the language flow better. So let's look at the first power-up. It's the a contraction. The formula is super simple. A plus lequel equals auquel. That's it. It just smooshes together. And of course, just like before, this little guy adapts to gender and number, giving us auquel, à laquelle, auquels, and auquels. And you've probably guessed it. The exact same thing happens with the preposition de. The formula is de plus lequel, and that fuses into duquel. And once again, it follows the same pattern with its 4 forms: duquel, de laquelle, desquels, and desquelles. See? Once you know the rule, it's totally predictable. Okay, that's a lot of forms, I know. So how do you actually use this stuff without getting your brain in a twist? Here is your super simple 3-step mental checklist. Step 1, just find the verb and the preposition it uses, like penser à to think of or parler de to talk about. Step 2, check the noun you're talking about, what's its gender and number. And finally, step 3, just put those 2 pieces together to build the right pronoun. Auquel, à laquelle, duquel, whatever you need. It's a little system that works every single time. Okay, theory time is over. Now for the really important part, the real world. How does this actually work in formal versus spoken French? Because, and this is a big one, what you learn in a grammar book is not always what you're going to hear in a real conversation. Knowing the difference is key. Okay, check this out. It's all about precision versus simplicity. If you're writing an essay or giving a formal speech, you would 100% say, c'est le film auquel je pensais. That is perfectly correct. But if you're just chatting with a friend, you're way more likely to hear them say, c'est le film que je pensais. They just simplify it. Same thing with the second example. La raison pour laquelle il est parti is beautiful formal French, but in everyday speech, you'll probably just hear la raison qu'il est parti. Spoken French loves shortcuts, so you need to know the formal way to write and sound smart, and you need to know the informal way so you can understand what's actually being said to you. All right, you've absorbed the theory, you've seen the real-world examples, now it's time to face the final boss. It's practice time. This is how we're going to make sure all this new information really, truly sticks in your brain. Okay, here's your first question. You need to complete the sentence, Le film blank, je fais référence, est un classique. Go ahead, take a second and think about it. What goes in that blank? And the answer is, auquel. Did you get it? The reason is that the expression is always faire référence à something. And since le film is masculine and singular, you take your a, you add lequel, and they contract into auquel. Perfect. Okay, round 2. Ready? Complete this sentence. Les problèmes blank nous avons discuté sont complexes. The key here is to think about that verb, discuter. The correct answer here is desquels. So the verb is discuter de something.
to discuss about something. The noun we're talking about, les problèmes, is masculine and it's plural. So you take de, you add the masculine plural form lesquels, and you get the power up desquels. See? You're totally getting the hang of this. Okay, so let's do a quick recap. What are the most important things to remember from all this? First, use lequel and its buddies after prepositions like sur, pour, avec. Second, always make sure it matches the gender and number of the noun. Third, don't forget those special contractions for a and de, that's auquel and duquel. And finally, remember that this whole structure is your ticket to sounding really polished and advanced, especially in written French. So there you have it. You've just unlocked a brand new level in your French. This is a massive tool that lets you express complex ideas with so much more precision and elegance. Seriously, you've taken a huge step forward today. So that leaves me with one final question for you. What's next? Now that you've tackled this, what other part of French grammar are you ready to conquer? Thanks so much for joining me, and keep that momentum going.
Hey everyone, do you ever feel like your French is, well, technically correct, but just a little bit choppy? You know, like you're putting down one sentence and then another instead of weaving them together into a smooth, logical flow? Well, today we're going to fix that. We're diving into a super simple trick to instantly make your French sound way more sophisticated.
Okay, just look at this. On the left, we've got two totally fine but separate sentences. It's raining. I'm going out anyway. Simple enough, right? But now look at the right. Just by adding one little word, tutoie, the whole thing just transforms. It's suddenly more connected, more elegant. Honestly, it just sounds more French, doesn't it? This tiny change right here is the difference between good French and great French.
So how do we do it? How do we get from that basic, choppy level to sounding brilliant and cohesive? How do we build those little bridges between our ideas so we're not just communicating, but really expressing ourselves with some style? Well, that is exactly what we're about to break down.
And here's the secret. It's not about memorizing hundreds of new vocab words. Nope, it's all about mastering a few really powerful super connectors. Think of them like linguistic glue for your sentences. But it's not just any glue, it's the good stuff. It doesn't just stick ideas together, it shows the relationship between them. It's almost like a GPS for the person listening to you, guiding them through your thoughts.
And you know what the best part is? We're only going to focus on 4 of them to get this huge impact. That's it, just 4. These are our magic words for today. Toutefois, néanmoins, en revanche, and dès lors. I promise by the end of this, you'll know exactly when and how to pop these into your sentences to really level up your French.
All right, let's dive into our first couple of words. These guys are all about expressing opposition or contrast. And this is so important, right? I mean, it's how you build a solid argument or just explain 2 different sides of a story.
First up, we have toutefois and néanmoins. Now, the key word to latch onto here is surprising. You pull these out when you're about to introduce a contrast that's a little unexpected, something that makes your listener go, "Oh, I didn't see that coming." Now, they're pretty much interchangeable, but néanmoins can sometimes feel a little bit stronger, kind of like saying, in spite of everything. But honestly, for now, just think of them as your power duo for any surprising twist.
In this example, just nails it. You say, the restaurant is expensive. Okay, so in my head, I'm thinking, all right, probably not worth it. But then, bam, you hit me with, toutefois, la nourriture est délicieuse. That, however, completely flips my expectation. That little word signals an unexpected positive that totally changes the game. It just adds this awesome layer of nuance, you know?
Okay, next up is en revanche. Now this is different from toutefois. With this one, we're not trying to be surprising. En revanche is all about a simple, direct contrast. It's your classic, on the one hand this, but on the other hand that. You're just putting 2 balanced ideas side by side to compare them.
This is a perfect example. Her brother is super athletic. En revanche, she prefers to read. See? No surprise there. It's just a simple fact. He likes sports, she likes books. It's a straight-up A versus B comparison, and en revanche is the perfect tool for that job. It handles that contrast so cleanly. Okay, so we've got contrast down. Let's move on to our last connector for today. This one is all about showing a logical result or consequence.
And that brings us to the fantastic dès lors. This is your go-to word whenever you want to say therefore or as a result of that. It forges this really strong logical link between 2 ideas. It's pure cause and effect. Because they happened, dès lors, B happened. Simple as that. I mean, look how clean this is. The flight was canceled.
Okay, that's our cause. So what's the direct logical result of that? Dès lors, nous avons dû prendre le train. Therefore, we had to take the train. That one word makes the connection between the two events so clear and, well, so elegant. All right, you ready for the big reveal? We've learned the tools, we've seen how they work. Now let's circle all the way back to that very first example we looked at. But this time, we're going to see it with fresh eyes and understand exactly why it's so good.
And here we are back at the start. It's raining. So the normal logical expectation is you stay inside, right? But what are you doing? You're going out anyway. You're introducing a surprising contrast to what's expected. And that, right there, is why toutefois is the absolute perfect choice. It signals, hey, I know it's raining, but contrary to what you'd think, I'm still going out. See how it all just clicks into place now?
Okay, enough of me talking. You've seen the theory, now it's your turn to get your hands dirty. This is the part where it really sinks in and becomes second nature. I'm going to give you a few simple sentence pairs, and your mission is to use our new little toolkit to upgrade them.
It's a super simple three-step process. All you have to do is read the basic sentences, pick the best connector for the job, and then put it all together. Let's do it.
All right, here's your challenge. I've got 3 pairs of sentences for you. Your job is to connect them with the right word. Ready? First one, the project is difficult. It's very interesting. Next up, she studied a lot. She passed her exam. And the last one, Paris is a big city. Lyon is calmer. So go ahead, pause this right now, and for each one, figure out if you need toutefois, en revanche, or dès lors. Give it a go.
And we'll finish up with this thought. Now that you have these awesome new tools in your pocket, the real question isn't just about this little exercise. It's about getting out there and using them. So really think about it. In your very next French conversation, or maybe the next email you write, where are you going to use one of these connectors first to really make your ideas shine?
All right, let's talk about one of the most powerful and honestly most fun parts of speaking French, the past tenses. Now, I know what you're thinking, grammar rules. But just for a minute, forget all that. We're going to look at these tenses for what they really are. They're like different camera lenses. Each one helps you tell a story in a totally different way. Okay, let's get into it.
So, take a look at this. On the left, we have il pleuvait. On the right, il a plu. Now, they both basically mean it rained. But here's the thing. In French, these two phrases paint completely different pictures. One sets a whole mood. The other just reports a fact. It's the difference between a blurry, atmospheric background and a sharp, specific event.
So that's the big question, right? What is the actual difference here, and how does picking one over the other totally change the story you're trying to tell? Once you get this, you're not just speaking French anymore. You're telling stories in French.
Okay, first up, let's talk about the tense that builds the world of our story, l'imparfait. This is your foundation. This is where it all starts.
You know, the absolute best way to think about the imparfait is to imagine it's your story's wide-angle camera shot. It's not focusing on one single thing. Nope, it's capturing the entire scene. What the weather was doing, what people were wearing, how everyone was feeling. It's all about that continuous, ongoing background vibe.
So let's start building a little story using it. Le soleil brillait et les oiseaux chantaient. The sun was shining, the birds were singing. You see how those actions don't really have a clear start or finish? They're just happening. They create this continuous atmosphere, which is the perfect backdrop for what's about to happen next. So, just to recap, you're going to reach for the imparfait anytime you're describing something, talking about feelings like I was happy, or mentioning things you used to do. Basically, if it was already going on in the background of your story, the imparfait is your go-to. But, I mean, a story needs some action, doesn't it? Things have to actually happen. So let's bring in the tense that really drives the plot forward.
So, if the imparfait was our wide-angle shot, then the passé composé is the close-up. It zooms right in on one specific, completed action, an event, something that happened and then it was over. This is how you move your story from point A to point B.
Okay, time to drop some action into our peaceful little scene. Un homme est entré dans le parc et il a salué son ami. A man entered the park. Boom, that's a specific, finished action. Then he greeted his friend. Boom, another one. These verbs, the ones in the passé composé, they're the plot points. They're what pushes the story ahead.
So yeah, you're using the passé composé for the main events of your story. It's for that sequence of actions. First this happened, then this happened. These are the sharp, completed moments that actually build your narrative.
And this table just lays it all out so perfectly. The imparfait is the scenery. The backdrop. The passé composé, that's the action happening right in front of it. The imparfait feels kind of blurry and continuous, while the passé composé is sharp, specific, and done. It really is the difference between setting and plot.
Okay, so we've got our scene and we've got our main action. But you know what makes a story really deep? Backstory. And to add that, we need one more tool in our toolkit. Let me introduce you to the plus que parfait. This is your flashback tool. And honestly, it's way simpler than it sounds. Anytime you're telling a story that's already in the past, and you need to talk about something that happened even before that, this is the tense you use. It's literally the past of the past.
Let's add some of that depth to our story right now. L'homme a salué son ami qu'il n'avait pas vu depuis des années. Okay, so he greeted his friend. But why is this a big deal? Well, because he hadn't seen him in years. You see, that not seeing happened before the greeting in the park. That's the plus que parfait giving us that crucial layer of backstory. This timeline just makes it crystal clear. Way back in the past, years ago, they had not seen each other. That's our flashback. Then this afternoon, the sun was shining. That's our background scene. And just a moment ago, the man entered and greeted his friend. That's our main event. See how they all work together to tell a much richer story?
All right, now for a quick look at a tense you'll see all the time in books, but you probably won't use when you're, ordering a coffee.
And that is the passé simple. Functionally, it does the exact same job as the passé composé. It marks a completed past action. The only real difference is that it's super formal and literary. You're going to find it in classic novels and fairy tales, but you almost never hear people actually say it out loud. So, il a salué son ami is what you'd actually say in a conversation. Il salua son ami is what you'd read in a novel by Victor Hugo. They mean the same thing, but they have a totally different vibe. It's good to know it exists so you can read it, but don't stress about using it when you talk.
All right, we have broken down all the tools. We've got our different camera lenses. Now, it's your turn to be the director and tell the story.
And here's your cheat sheet, your go-to guide. When you're telling a story in the past, just run through these 3 questions in your head. Am I just painting the background? Use the imparfait. Am I listing off the main events that happened? That's the passé composé. Am I explaining something that happened before all of that? You got it. That's the plus que parfait. It's really that simple. So let's put it to the test right now. How would you say this sentence in French? He was happy because he had finally found his friend. Think about it for a second. What's the ongoing feeling? And what action happened before that feeling started? The clues are all there. And that's the real takeaway here. Choosing between these tenses isn't just about passing a grammar test. It's a creative choice. It's about deciding if you want to set a scene, report a specific action, or give some of that crucial backstory. It's how you go from just being a speaker of French to being a storyteller in French. All right, let's talk about leveling up your French. We're going to unlock 2 super powerful structures that'll make you sound way more sophisticated and, honestly, just more natural. So let's get right into it. I'm guessing the answer is a big yes, right? Well, good news, because we're about to go way beyond the basics. Think of this as adding a couple of pro-level tools to your French toolkit, the kind native speakers use all the time to shift focus and just make their sentences flow better. Seriously, this is going to be a major upgrade.
Okay, so first things first, let's start with what we all know, the active voice. This is pretty much the foundation of every sentence we learn at the beginning, and it's our starting point for everything we're going to cover today.
So this is super straightforward, right? You got your subject, the mechanic, doing an action, repairing, to an object, the car. Simple, clear, direct. But what if you don't really care about the mechanic? What if the car is the real star of your story? How do you say that? And that, my friends, brings us to our first awesome tool, the passive voice. Think of it like a director's camera. Its main job is to swing the spotlight away from the person doing the action and shine it right on the person or thing getting the action. So here's the bottom line. You pull out the passive voice when the thing getting the action is way more important than who did it. It's a great way to sound a bit more formal or to really emphasize a result. Like saying, the cure was discovered. Who cares who discovered it right now? The point is we have a cure. Or, and this is a classic, it's used to avoid blaming someone. Think, mistakes were made. Or, the window was broken. See, the focus is all on what happened, not who did it. All right, let's grab our original sentence and actually do this. We're going to perform a little sentence surgery here and put that car
right where it belongs, front and center.
So how do we pull this off? It's actually a pretty simple formula. First, you take the object, in this case, la voiture, and you move it right to the beginning. It's the new subject now. Then, you pop in the verb être, to be, in whatever tense you need. After that, you add the past participle of the main verb, and hey, make sure it agrees with your new subject. Last step, if you still want to mention who did it, you can add them back in using the word par, which means by.
And voila, check out the difference. La voiture is totally the star of the show now. And did you spot that extra little E on repérer? That is so important. It's there because voiture is a feminine word, so the verb has to match. The focus is done a complete 180, from the mechanic to the car.
Okay, so we've got a handle on how to talk about what is done to something. But what about when you don't do the action yourself, but you make it happen? You have someone else do it for you. That's where our second amazing tool comes into play, the causative. This structure is just so useful and efficient in French. It's super simple. You just use the verb faire plus whatever verb you want in its infinitive form. You use this all the time when you're arranging for something to be done instead of doing it yourself. It's such a clean, common shortcut you're gonna love. Let's go back to our car example because it's perfect for this. If I say, je répare ma voiture, you picture me, right? I'm in my garage, I've got oil on my hands, I'm the one under the hood with a wrench. But if I say, je fais réparer ma voiture, the picture changes completely. Now I'm probably just on the phone with the garage making an appointment. I'm having the car repaired. I'm the one causing it to happen, but I'm not doing the work. That is a huge difference. So let me ask you a quick question. In that sentence, je fais réparer ma voiture, who's actually got the tools out? You got it. It's the mechanic. But notice how the mechanic doesn't even have to be in the sentence. Why? Because the focus is all on me, the person who kicked the whole thing off.
Okay, I know this can be a little confusing for people learning French. Passive, causative, they can sound similar. So let's put them head to head. A direct comparison should make everything crystal clear.
This chart really lays it all out for us. Let's look at the passive voice first. The focus? It's on the thing receiving the action. The structure? That's our être plus a past participle. And the meaning is basically that something is done. Now look at the causative. The focus shifts to the person causing the action. The structure is that slick faire plus an infinitive. And the meaning? It's all about having something done. See the difference? Okay, let's use an example we can all relate to. Pizza. If you say, la pizza a été livrée, that's passive. You're just announcing a happy fact. The pizza is here. The focus is on the pizza. But if you say, j'ai fait livrer une pizza, the focus is totally on you. It's like saying, I'm the hero who made this happen. I ordered the pizza. One is a statement about the pizza's status. The other is about your role in making it happen. And there you have it. You've officially added two incredibly powerful tools to your French grammar toolkit. This is awesome. Let's just do a quick recap of the main points.
Okay, so here are the key takeaways. Just lock these in. First, use the passive voice when you want to put the spotlight on the receiver of the action. To build it, you're going to use être plus the past participle. Got it? Next, use the causative. That's our faire plus infinitive, whenever you get someone else to do something for you. And trust me, you'll be amazed how often you use that little shortcut. It's a game changer.
Look, this isn't just about memorizing grammar rules for a test. This is about giving you the power to tell better stories in French. You can now play with perspective. You can express ideas in a much more sophisticated way. Things that felt clumsy before, now you have the tools to say them elegantly. So what are you waiting for? Go out there and try them out. I can't wait to see what you do with them.
All right, today we're going to tear down and rebuild a really powerful blueprint for learning. This is a method that's all about making new knowledge actually stick in your brain. We're going to break down how it works, and maybe more importantly, why it works so incredibly well.
But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever tried to learn a new, kind of complicated word? You know the drill. You read it, you look it up, you nod and think, okay, got it. And then like a week later, poof, it's just gone. Why is that? Why are some words just so slippery? And this right here is the heart of the problem, isn't it? It's not that you don't get it in that moment. You see the definition, it clicks, it makes perfect sense, but there is a huge, huge gap between that temporary nod of understanding and really, truly owning that word's meaning for the long haul. So yeah, let's just give it a name. Let's call it the forgettable word problem. because it's a totally universal feeling for anyone who's ever tried to build their vocabulary or get their head around a big idea. And it's the exact problem we're going to tackle today. Because what if I told you the secret isn't some fancy, expensive app or, hours of grueling flashcards? What if the whole strategy, the entire key, was tucked away inside a single, beautifully crafted prompt? Well, that's exactly what we have here. We're looking at a prompt that is so much more than just a request for some content. It's basically a master plan for learning effectively. So let's deconstruct it piece by piece and see what makes it tick. The whole thing starts with a really bold mission. This isn't about learning simple words. No, it's aiming high. It's targeting advanced learners and diving headfirst into the toughest topics out there. These big, abstract ideas from politics, philosophy, and psychology. It sets the bar high from the get-go. And this brings us to the most important point of all. The real genius of this blueprint isn't just the topics it picks. It's the process it lays out. It's all about building your understanding step by step, layer by layer, instead of just tossing a definition at you and hoping it sticks. So how does this blueprint actually pull it off? How does it bring words to life? Well, it's all about turning them from something dry on a page into a living, breathing concept. Okay, let's take a word like hegemony. Here's your classic dictionary definition. I mean, it's accurate, it's correct, it tells you what the word means. This is the way we've all been taught to learn new words, right? But let's be real for a second. Is that memorable? Is reading that one sentence going to make hegemony a word you actually use? For most of us, nope. It just doesn't have those little hooks our brain needs to hang on to it. Now watch how the blueprint fixes this. It doesn't throw the definition away. It just says, that's step one. From there, it builds out. It gives you synonyms. Then it shows you how the word is used in a real sentence. And finally, it brings out its secret weapon, a scenario-based dialogue. This part right here, this is the absolute game changer. The instruction to include short scenario-based dialogues. This is the one step that takes it from a boring old lesson and turns it into something you can actually experience. So why is that so powerful? Well, because dialogues take a huge abstract idea like hegemony, and they ground it in something our brains are wired to understand, a simple conversation between people. It gives the word a voice, a personality, a situation. It makes it concrete, and because it's concrete, it's suddenly memorable. But this blueprint isn't just about the words themselves. It also gets that how we see information is every bit as important as the information itself, and that's where visual clarity comes into play. The instruction is so simple but so smart. Use elegant visuals and minimal text for clarity. And listen, this has nothing to do with making things look pretty. This is a strategic move, and it's backed by the science of learning. I mean, this says it all, doesn't it? On one side, you've got a total wall of text. It's just cognitive overload. Your brain doesn't even know where to start. On the other side, it's clean. It's focused. It's easy to absorb. Which one do you think is going to stick? So again, this is not just an aesthetic choice, it's a scientific one. By keeping the text to a minimum, the blueprint lowers the cognitive load, which is just a fancy way of saying it makes less work for your brain. That frees up all your mental energy to focus on the actual idea, not on trying to read a novel on a slide. So, after we've taken this whole master plan apart, what have we actually learned? Let's boil it all down to the key principles that make this thing work so well. Here they are. First, context is king. A word without it is just noise. Second, scenarios create memory. They turn ideas into stories. Then you've got to go from abstract to concrete to make things feel real. Fourth, simplicity aids focus. You got to cut the clutter. And finally, when you put it all together, you get true immersion. And that's what leads to deep understanding. So this is a fantastic blueprint for learning new words, no doubt. But it leaves you with a really big, interesting question, doesn't it? If this method works so incredibly well for something like vocabulary, what other complex subjects or skills or big ideas could we master if we just applied these same principles?
All right, today we're going to break down a skill that is honestly essential for just about everything: how to build a rock-solid, persuasive argument in French. We're going to go piece by piece so you can walk away from this ready to construct your points like a pro. Okay, let's get into it.
We've all been there, right? You're staring at a blank page and you have to write something persuasive. That question, ready to build an unbeatable argument, can feel, well, a little intimidating, but it really doesn't have to be. The secret isn't some kind of magic writing ability.
Nope, it's all about having a solid plan.
And that's exactly what we're going to talk about. I want you to start thinking of yourself as an architect, and what every good architect needs is a blueprint. We're not just, throwing words onto a page here. We are consciously and carefully constructing an impressive, solid structure from the ground up.
So where does any construction project begin? With the foundation. And in the world of arguments, your foundation is the thesis statement, or la thèse. It is, without a doubt, the most critical part of your entire piece. Everything, and I mean everything, is built on top of it.
So what is this thing, really? Well, the thesis is the core idea, the main opinion you're setting out to defend. To put it even more simply, it's your direct answer to the question you were asked. It's not just a statement of fact. It's your specific, arguable point of view on a topic.
Now, for a thesis to be a strong foundation, it has to have these three qualities. First, it's got to be clear, super clear, no confusion. Second, specific. It can't be some vague, general idea. It has to be focused. And third, and this is the big one, it has to be disgustable. It has to be debatable. Think about it. If no one can possibly disagree with you, you don't have an argument. You just have a fact.
Okay, our foundation is poured and solid. What's next? It's time to erect the pillars that are going to hold up the whole structure. These are your arguments. Each one is like a heavy-duty, load-bearing column designed specifically to support the full weight of your thesis.
And here is a fantastic, almost foolproof, three-step formula for building each one of those pillars. Step 1, affirmer. State your main idea. Your topic sentence. Step 2, prover. Prove it. You've got to back it up with evidence. A fact, a quote from a text, a statistic. And finally, step 3, expliquer. You explain how that proof actually supports your claim. And this is key, how it links all the way back to your main thesis. That last step is the glue. All right, you ready for a pro-level move? A good architect doesn't just put up walls. They add reinforcements to make sure the building can withstand any pressure. That's exactly what a counterargument does for your essay. Trust me, acknowledging the other side doesn't weaken your case. It actually strengthens it. It shows you've thought about all the angles and you're ready for anything. So here's the strategy. A counterargument is where you bring up an opposing point of view, but you do it so you can immediately shut it down. You acknowledge it and then you refute it. It's a power move. It shows the reader that you're confident and that your position is the most reasonable and well-thought-out one.
Think of it like a 1-2 punch. First, on the left, you have the contra phase. This is where you fairly and honestly present the other side's opinion. You can't make it sound silly. Then bam, the second punch on the right, the refutation. This is where you show exactly why that opposing view is flawed or maybe just less important than your own point. It's incredibly persuasive.
Okay, we've seen the blueprint, we've looked at all the raw materials. Now it's time to put on our hard hats and take a tour of a finished building. Let's walk through an example to see how all of these pieces come together in practice.
Just look at how this table lays it all out. It's perfect. The topic is social media's impact. The thesis in the intro takes a clear negative stand. Then look at argument 1. That's our first pillar. It claims a link to cyberbullying and then proves it with a statistic. Then you see the counterargument. It brings up the fair point about supportive communities, but then immediately refutes it by highlighting all the negative content. And finally, the conclusion wraps it all up and hammers that thesis home one last time. You can see the whole blueprint in action right there.
We have one last crucial element to add to our construction project. It's the thing that holds it all together. See, if your arguments are the bricks, then the logical connectors are the cement. They create a smooth, logical flow from one idea to the next, guiding your reader through your argument without them ever getting lost.
And this table here? This is your toolkit. You wouldn't use a hammer for every single job, would you? It's the same idea here. If you're adding another point, you grab a word like de plus. If you're showing why something happened, you use car. If you're explaining a result, you go for donc. And for that counterargument, you need cependant. Using the right word is so important for making your logic crystal clear.
So, let's do a final check of our blueprint. To build an argument that can't be knocked down, you need these 4 things. 1, a solid foundation. That's your thesis. 2, robust pillars, your well-built arguments. 3, intelligent reinforcements, your slick counterargument. And 4, the perfect finish, those smooth connectors that tie it all together beautifully.
And there you have it, the complete architectural plan. That blank page isn't an obstacle anymore. It's a construction site, and you're the one in charge. So the only question left to ask is, what amazing argument are you going to build?
All right, let's talk about something that can totally transform your French. making you sound way less like you're reading from a textbook and much more natural. Today, we are going to demystify one of the most powerful tools in the French language, the conditional tense. So here's the game plan. We'll kick things off with why it's the ultimate politeness tool. Then we'll see how to build it, put it into action, sidestep some common mistakes, and finally get into the deep stuff, regrets and what-ifs. Okay, so first up, why is this tense such a big deal? Well, in French, it's pretty much your secret weapon for navigating any social situation gracefully. It's the difference between just stating facts and actually, connecting with people. It just adds that layer of courtesy that's so important in the language. Picture this. You're in a beautiful Parisian cafe. You really need your morning coffee, but you don't want to be that tourist who comes off as rude or demanding. So what do you say? What's the move? And here is where the magic happens. On the left, you have je veux un café. I mean, it's grammatically correct. It means I want a coffee. But it can sound pretty blunt, almost like an order. But then look at the right. Je voudrais un café. It's like a politeness filter. That one little change instantly softens the whole thing. It's a total game changer. All right, so how do we actually make this incredibly useful tense? Well, you're going to love this because it follows a really straightforward formula. No sweat. Seriously, think of it like snapping two Lego bricks together. It's a simple two-step process. First, you grab the verb's infinitive, the full to-do something form. For most verbs, that's your base, your first Lego brick. Then you just click the right ending onto it. And what are those endings? Check these out. If you've already learned the imperfect tense, the l'imparfait, you're in for a treat because these are the exact same endings. Yep, really. You don't have to learn a whole new set. You're just recycling something you probably already know. Okay, I know what you're thinking. What about the irregulars? French loves them, right? Well, here's more good news. The stems you need for the conditional are the very same ones you use for the future tense. So for avoir, it's are. For être, it's ser. Once you nail these common ones, you've honestly unlocked a huge chunk of the language. So, we know how to build it. Now for the really fun part. Let's unleash its superpowers and see what this tense can actually do for you in a real conversation. We already know it's a rock star for making polite requests, but that is just scratching the surface. It's also perfect for giving advice tactfully, without sounding like a know-it-all. It's your absolute go-to for any what-if scenario. And, get this, you can even use it for reporting information you're not 100% sure about, like rumors. It's like the Swiss Army knife of French tenses. Let's zoom in on one of its biggest jobs, creating those hypothetical if clauses. This is a classic combo. You just have to know. The formula is always the same. The if part of the sentence, the C clause, uses the imperfect tense, and the result, the then part, uses the conditional. If this were to happen, then this would happen. Let's see that formula in action. Si j'avais, see that? Avait is imperfect. That's our hypothetical setup. And the result? J'achèterais une nouvelle voiture. There it is. Achèterais is our conditional. If I had more money, I would buy a new car. See how they work together? Perfect. Okay, let's talk about a couple of common traps that even advanced learners can fall into. If you can avoid these, your French is going to sound so much more polished. These are the real pro tips. All right, lean in for this one because it is super subtle but absolutely crucial. Look at the ending for the je form. For the future, it ends in I. For the conditional, it's es. I know, they sound almost identical when you say them, but that tiny little s changes the meaning completely. From I will speak to I would speak. That's a huge deal. And here it is, the big one, the golden rule. If you remember one thing, make it this. You never, ever use the conditional tense in the C clause itself. Never. That part of the sentence always gets the imperfect. So it's si j'étais riche, if I were rich. It is not si je serais riche. That's the number one mistake, and if you can avoid it, you'll be way ahead of the game. Ready to level up? Let's talk about the past. This is where we get into the really cool stuff, exploring alternate histories, talking about things that would have, could have, or should have happened. So how do we build this thing? Well, if you already know the passé composé, you're basically halfway there. It's the same idea. You take your helping verb, avoir or être, but you put that verb into the conditional. Then you just add the past participle of your main verb. Simple as that. So j'aurais plus fait gives you j'aurais fait. I would have done. And this is probably the most common way you'll hear it used. This is the classic way to express regret or give advice about something that already happened. Aurait dû means should have. It's the perfect phrase for all those hindsight is 20/20 moments. You should have left earlier. We've all been there. And here's the whole shebang, a full past hypothetical. This is for talking about impossible scenarios in the past, things you just can't change. The if part, si j'avais su, means if I had known. That's our unreal past condition. And the result, j'aurais agi autrement. I would have acted differently. That's our past conditional delivering the imagined outcome. So I'm going to leave you with a little food for thought, something to get you practicing right away. Think about this for a second, in French if you can. If you had known then what you know now, what would you have done differently? It's a powerful question, right? And the amazing thing is, you now have the grammar tools to answer it. Pretty cool. On s'est déjà demandé comment une toute petite phrase peut, en fait, contenir toute une culture. Eh bien, certaines expressions françaises, ce sont de vrais trésors. Elles ne livrent leurs secrets que si on regarde un peu au-delà des mots. Alors allons-y, plongeons ensemble dans cet univers fascinant. Alors, pour commencer, une question simple. Que veut dire « tomber dans les pommes » ? Si on prend ça au pied de la lettre, ça veut dire, eh bien, tomber dans des pommes. C'est complètement absurde, non ? On s'imagine tout de suite en train de trébucher dans un verger. Mais alors, qu'est-ce que ça cache, vraiment, cette image ? Et la voilà, la réponse. Le contraste est assez énorme et plutôt drôle en fait. D'un côté, on a une image super fruitée et de l'autre, un malaise, quelqu'un qui perd connaissance. C'est précisément ce décalage, ce fossé entre les deux qui rend ces expressions si uniques. Oui, c'est exactement ça, le cœur du sujet. Cet écart immense entre le sens littéral des mots et ce que la culture ressent, c'est une vraie mine d'or. C'est pile là qu'on commence à découvrir les petits secrets d'une langue et, bien sûr, des gens qui la parlent. Bon, allons explorer ça d'un peu plus près. La langue française, elle adore utiliser des images, disons, surprenantes, et très souvent, elles sont liées à la nourriture pour parler de sentiments que, finalement, on connaît tous. Ce qui est génial avec celle-ci, c'est la variété. Avoir la pêche, la patate et même la frite. On dirait que n'importe lequel de ces aliments peut donner une énergie folle. C'est une manière, on peut le dire, assez savoureuse de dire que tout va super bien. Ah, le fromage, bien sûr, c'est un vrai pilier de la culture française. Mais attention, ici, il ne représente pas le plaisir, non, il représente le drame. Quand on dit de quelqu'un qu'il en fait tout un fromage, ça veut dire qu'il transforme un tout petit problème en une affaire d'État. C'est l'image parfaite de l'exagération. Et une autre, se prendre un râteau. Rien que l'image. La citation ici le dit très bien. Aïe, ça capture parfaitement ce que l'on ressent quand on se fait rejeter. C'est soudain, douloureux et un peu embarrassant. L'image est un peu violente, un peu ridicule aussi, mais elle tape en plein dans le mille. C'est toute la force des mots pour décrire une expérience qu'on a tous plus ou moins vécue. Et les animaux alors ? Eh bien, parlons des chats. Un petit chiffre pour le contexte. En France, en 2017, on estimait qu'il y avait 13,5 millions de chats de compagnie. C'est énorme. Du coup, ce n'est pas très surprenant de voir que nos amis les félins se sont invités dans pas mal de nos expressions. En voilà une, par exemple, qui est très très courante. Donner sa langue au chat. Ça veut simplement dire qu'on abandonne, qu'on arrête de chercher la réponse à une devinette. C'est une phrase qu'on entend tout le temps avec les enfants et ça montre bien à quel point le chat a une place spéciale dans notre imaginaire. Mais au-delà de l'humour et des images amusantes, il y a des expressions qui sont de véritables fenêtres sur la culture. Elles nous donnent de vrais indices sur une certaine façon de penser, un état d'esprit qui est parfois perçu comme très français. Alors là, on a un concept qui est célèbre pour être quasi intraduisible, l'esprit d'escalier. L'image derrière est juste parfaite. C'est ce moment où on pense enfin à la réplique parfaite, à la réponse géniale qu'on aurait dû donner. Sauf qu'on est déjà en train de descendre l'escalier pour partir. C'est trop tard, le moment est passé. C'est fascinant quand on y pense, non ? Le simple fait qu'une expression existe pour ça, ça en dit long sur l'importance qu'on accorde à la conversation, à la répartie, aux mots d'esprit dans la culture française. C'est comme si, en donnant un nom à cette frustration que tout le monde connaît, on lui donnait ses lettres de noblesse. Maintenant, attention. Et si on découvrait qu'une phrase qui a l'air aussi banale que « les carottes sont cuites » cache en réalité une histoire incroyable, une histoire de drame et même de rébellion. Oui, accrochez-vous bien parce que son évolution est juste spectaculaire. Alors, regardons cette chronologie. Au début, au XVIIe siècle, les carottes, c'est un truc de pauvre. L'expression est associée à la misère. Au XIXe, ça évolue. Ça veut dire que quelqu'un est en train de mourir, que c'est la fin, qu'il n'y a plus aucun espoir. Et puis, tout bascule. Juin 1944.
Radio Londres, à la BBC, utilise cette phrase comme message codé pour la résistance. Elle annonce ni plus ni moins que le débarquement, un tournant majeur de l'histoire. Et ce n'est pas tout. Elle a même été réutilisée plus tard comme signal dans un autre contexte politique tendu.
C'est là que c'est incroyable. La même phrase est passée du sens « c'est fini », dans le sens le plus désespéré du terme, à « ça y est, on y va », un cri de ralliement, un message révolutionnaire. Elle a complètement inversé sa signification. Ça prouve à quel point le langage est une matière vivante qui peut être façonnée par les grands moments de l'histoire.
Alors au final, qu'est-ce que tout ça nous révèle ? Eh bien que ces expressions, elles sont beaucoup plus que de simples petites curiosités linguistiques. En fait, ce sont des morceaux de notre ADN culturel. On y trouve notre histoire, notre humour, notre manière de voir le monde.
Donc si on devait résumer ce petit voyage, qu'est-ce qu'on retient ? D'abord que la traduction littérale, bien souvent, elle passe complètement à côté de la plaque. On a vu ensemble comment des images un peu folles peuvent décrire parfaitement nos émotions. Comment des mots intraduisibles révèlent en fait ce qui est important pour une culture. Et enfin, comment une phrase toute simple peut porter en elle tout le poids de l'histoire.
Et pour finir, je me pose une question pour ouvrir la discussion. Parce que, évidemment, chaque langue a ses propres trésors, ses propres images uniques qui en disent tellement. Alors, quelles sont ces expressions intraduisibles dans d'autres langues et qu'est-ce qu'elles nous apprennent sur leur culture ? C'est une réflexion qui, finalement, ne fait que commencer.
Et si on rendait nos histoires en français, beaucoup plus fluides, beaucoup plus vivantes, c'est exactement à ça que sert le discours rapporté. C'est vraiment l'outil clé pour raconter une anecdote, pour partager une conversation, bref, pour devenir un pro de la narration. Allez, c'est parti, on décortique ça ensemble. Alors voilà notre plan de match pour aujourd'hui. D'abord, on va voir les bases tranquillement. Qu'est-ce que c'est le discours rapporté ? Ensuite, on va s'attaquer au gros morceau, le cœur du sujet, la fameuse concordance des temps. Puis, on verra les petits ajustements de temps et de lieu. Et bien sûr, à la fin, on met tout en pratique, histoire que tout ça devienne un véritable réflexe. Bon, on plonge dans le vif du sujet. Le discours rapporté, au fond, c'est ni plus ni moins que l'art de raconter. C'est simplement le fait de redire ce que quelqu'un a dit, mais avec ses propres mots. Et en fait, on l'utilise absolument tous les jours, la plupart du temps sans même s'en rendre compte. Tiens, cette question, on se la pose tout le temps, non ? Un ami nous raconte quelque chose, et hop, on veut le répéter à quelqu'un d'autre. C'est pile à ce moment-là que le discours rapporté entre en jeu. On passe du statut d'auditeur à celui de narrateur. Regardez bien la différence ici. À gauche, on a le discours direct. Là, c'est simple, on est un peu comme un magnétophone, on cite mot pour mot, avec les guillemets. Marie dit « je suis fatiguée ». À droite, c'est le discours indirect. On intègre ces paroles dans notre propre phrase. Marie dit qu'elle est fatiguée. On sent bien que c'est beaucoup plus fluide, beaucoup plus naturel dans une conversation, non ? Donc pour faire simple, le discours rapporté, c'est quand on rapporte des paroles, mais sans faire un copier-coller. Et pour ça, nos outils un peu magiques, ce sont des verbes introducteurs comme dire que, demander si, etc. C'est cette petite mécanique qui va tout changer et c'est la base de tout ce qui va suivre. Parfait. Maintenant que les bases sont posées, on va faire notre premier pas. On va commencer par le cas de figure le plus simple, le plus courant. Une fois que celui-là est maîtrisé, je vous promets que le reste semblera beaucoup plus logique. C'est vraiment la clé pour prendre confiance. Et voilà la règle d'or, la toute première à retenir. Si le verbe qu'on utilise pour rapporter est au présent, par exemple « il dit », alors aucune prise de tête. Le temps du verbe qu'on rapporte ne bouge pas. Il ne change absolument pas. C'est aussi simple que ça. Prenons un exemple concret. Paul dit « je vais au cinéma ». Comme le verbe « dire » est au présent, on n'a rien à faire sur le temps du verbe de Paul. « vais » reste au présent. La seule chose qui change, c'est le pronom. « Je » devient « il » pour que ça colle à notre narration. Logique, non ? Bon, maintenant qu'on est bien échauffé, on passe au niveau supérieur. C'est le cœur du réacteur, le truc qui fait toute la subtilité et l'élégance du français. La concordance des temps. Ça peut faire un peu peur au début, mais promis, si on y va étape par étape, ça va devenir limpide. Et voici la règle qui change la donne. Dès que notre verbe pour rapporter est au passé, il a dit, elle pensait, eh bien toute la phrase qu'on rapporte doit faire un voyage dans le temps. Le temps du verbe original doit faire un pas en arrière. C'est comme si on rembobinait un peu la cassette. Alors ça, c'est la diapositive à garder en tête, un véritable mémo. Observez bien ce glissement. Le présent, hop, il recule vers l'imparfait. Le passé composé, qui est déjà dans le passé, recule encore plus loin, jusqu'au plus que parfait. Et le futur, lui, il se transforme en conditionnel présent. C'est ce petit voyage dans le temps qui fait toute la différence. Premier cas concret. Elle a dit « je suis contente ». Au moment où elle parlait, c'était du présent. Mais nous, on le rapporte après coup. Donc son sentiment est maintenant dans le passé de notre récit. Logiquement, son « je suis » se transforme en « qu'elle était ».
Le présent a glissé à l'imparfait.
Et si l'action qu'on rapporte était déjà au passé? Par exemple, il a dit « j'ai fini mon travail ». L'action de finir était déjà passée quand il l'a dit. Alors quand on le rapporte, il faut pousser cette action encore plus loin dans le passé. Le passé composé recule donc jusqu'au plus que parfait. Il a dit qu'il l'avait fini. C'est ce qu'on appelle le passé du passé.
On a fait le plus dur. Vraiment, c'était les verbes. Maintenant, c'est la touche finale, le petit détail qui va rendre le récit parfaitement cohérent et naturel. On doit aussi ajuster les marqueurs de temps et de lieu. C'est ce qui fait que tout sonne juste à l'oreille.
Tout est une question de perspective. C'est logique en fait. Si quelqu'un dit « je pars demain », et qu'on raconte ça 3 jours plus tard, le mot « demain » n'a plus de sens. Il devient le lendemain. Pareil pour hier, qui devient la veille, ou aujourd'hui, qui devient ce jour-là. On recalibre simplement le GPS temporel de notre histoire. Bon, à cette théorie, on passe à la pratique. C'est le moment d'assembler toutes les pièces du puzzle qu'on vient d'étudier. On va prendre une phrase complète et la transformer ensemble, étape par étape. C'est un peu comme un jeu de construction, vous allez voir.
Pour être sûr de ne rien oublier, voici une petite checklist en 4 étapes. 1. On regarde la phrase de départ. 2. On ajuste le pronom. 3. L'étape cruciale, on décale le temps du verbe. Et 4. Le coup de polish final, on ajuste le marqueur de temps ou de lieu. En suivant cet ordre, impossible de se tromper.
Allez, voici notre défi. Il a dit « je partirai demain ». On analyse rapidement, on a le verbe « a dit » au passé. Ça, c'est le signal qui nous dit « attention, il va y avoir des changements ». On a le pronom « je », le verbe au futur « partirai » et le marqueur de temps « demain ». On a tous les ingrédients pour appliquer notre méthode. Et voilà le travail. Il a dit qu'il partirait le lendemain. On décortique ? Je est bien devenu « il ». Le futur partirait à reculer pour devenir du conditionnel présent, partirait, et enfin, le demain s'est logiquement transformé en le lendemain. Chaque règle a été appliquée, la phrase est impeccable. Voilà, toutes les clés sont sur la table. Le discours rapporté, ce n'est pas juste une règle de grammaire un peu compliquée, c'est bien plus que ça. C'est ce qui nous permet de passer de simples rapporteurs de faits à véritables conteurs. C'est l'outil qui donne de la vie, de la couleur à nos souvenirs, aux conversations qu'on partage. Alors, la vraie question maintenant, ce n'est plus comment raconter, mais plutôt, quelle est la prochaine histoire qui mérite d'être partagée ?
On a tous déjà eu cette impression, non? En lisant un titre de journal en français, on est frappé par sa concision, sa puissance. Eh bien, il y a un secret derrière ça. Un outil linguistique qui transforme des phrases un peu longues en déclarations super percutantes. Et aujourd'hui, on va percer ce secret ensemble.
Tenez, premier exemple, c'est direct, c'est rapide, ça plante le décor tout de suite, il n'y a pas un seul mot de trop.
On continue, deuxième exemple, et c'est la même chose. L'action est mise en avant, on saisit l'info principale en 1 seconde. L'impact est immédiat.
Et là, c'est encore plus fort. 3 mots, juste 3 mots, et ça suffit à nous faire ressentir toute l'urgence de la situation. C'est d'une efficacité redoutable.
Alors la question c'est, comment est-ce possible? C'est quoi ce tour de magie qui permet de condenser autant d'infos et de créer un tel impact avec si peu de mots?
La réponse, elle tient en un seul mot, la nominalisation. C'est ça la clé de ce style si direct. Alors, c'est parti, on va décortiquer ce concept ensemble.
La nominalisation, qu'est-ce que c'est au fond? C'est tout simple, c'est l'action de transformer un verbe ou un adjectif en un nom. Et le but, c'est de rendre la phrase plus courte, plus dense, plus directe. C'est un véritable outil de précision linguistique.
Regardez, cet exemple est parfait pour comprendre. D'un côté, on a une phrase classique avec un sujet, un verbe, les médecins manifestent. De l'autre, une formule beaucoup plus punchy, manifestation des médecins. On sent tout de suite le style journalistique, pas vrai?
Et ça marche aussi avec les adjectifs. Les températures sont douces, devient douceur des températures. Le résultat est, je trouve, plus élégant, un peu plus formel. Ici, c'est l'adjectif douce qui a été transformé en nom, douceur.
Ok, maintenant qu'on a compris le pourquoi, on va passer au comment. Parce qu'il y a des règles, des sortes de schémas pour construire ces noms à partir de verbes ou d'adjectifs.
L'idée générale, la plus fréquente, c'est d'ajouter une terminaison, ce qu'on appelle un suffixe, à la racine du mot. Ces suffixes, c'est un peu comme des briques de construction qui changent la nature du mot.
Pour les verbes, on voit des modèles très courants. Par exemple, le suffixe ation transforme narrer en narration, ou encore ement pour passer de enseigner à enseignement. C'est un mécanisme assez régulier en fait.
Et pour les adjectifs, eh bien, c'est la même logique. On a des suffixes comme heure qui fait de large la largeur, ou ité pour passer de fidèle à fidélité. Une fois qu'on commence à les repérer, on les voit absolument partout.
Mais attention, ce serait trop facile si c'était toujours aussi simple. Parfois, la transformation est un peu plus profonde, et c'est la racine même du mot, ce qu'on appelle le radical, qui change. Ce sont les petites exceptions à connaître.
Reprenons à nos exemples du début qui est très parlant. Le verbe découvrir ne devient pas découvrition. Non, ça devient la découverte. Le radical a été modifié. C'est une de ces irrégularités qu'il faut mémoriser.
Connaître les règles, c'est bien. Mais ce qui est vraiment intéressant, c'est de comprendre l'impact concret de cette technique. Alors, voyons un peu ce fameux pouvoir de la concision en action. Alors, au final, pourquoi tout ça est si important? D'abord, parce que ça permet de créer des titres qui claquent, qui sonnent pro. Ensuite, ça peut fusionner deux phrases en une seule formule bien plus élégante. Et de manière générale, ça rend l'expression à l'écrit comme à l'oral beaucoup plus sophistiquée. Regardez cet exemple. Au lieu de dire en deux temps « Baptiste est malade, cela l'empêche de sortir », on peut condenser tout ça en une seule phrase bien plus fluide. « La maladie de Baptiste l'empêche de sortir ». Le résultat est plus direct, plus chic, non?
Bon, à cette théorie, c'est le moment de mettre les mains dans le cambouis. Essayons un peu. Comment est-ce qu'on pourrait transformer la phrase qui suit en un vrai titre de journal?
Alors voilà la phrase « Le musée de la ville a été incendié hier soir ». Prenez une petite seconde pour y réfléchir. Comment la rendre plus percutante?
Et voilà, la version nominalisée, ce serait « Incendie du musée de la ville hier soir ». Le verbe « incendier » devient le nom « incendie » et hop, on a un titre de presse parfait. Excellent! Allez, un dernier pour bien maîtriser le concept. La phrase est « Un homme a été agressé par un gorille au zoo du Prado ». Et le titre devient « Agression d'un homme par un gorille au zoo du Prado ». Ici, le verbe « agresser » s'est transformé en nom. Agression, c'est exactement ce style efficace et direct qu'on cherche à obtenir. Maintenant que le secret est dévoilé, la vraie question c'est où d'autre est-ce qu'on peut observer cette puissance de la nominalisation à l'œuvre? Si on ouvre bien l'œil et qu'on tend l'oreille, on se rend vite compte qu'en fait, elle est absolument partout.
So, let's talk about one of the most exciting and, sometimes pretty intimidating parts of speaking French, the art of the debate. By the time we're done here, you're not just going to have the tools to keep up, you'll be able to jump into any French discussion with real confidence.
You know that feeling, right? You're in a conversation with French speakers, it's moving a mile a minute, opinions are flying everywhere, and it's so easy to just feel, well, left behind. But here's the thing, getting the hang of this isn't about being the loudest person in the room. It's a skill. It's kind of like a conversational dance. And today, we're going to learn all the steps.
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by understanding what makes French debates tick. Then we'll build our skills from the ground up, starting with agreeing, then diving into the real heart of it, how to disagree politely. After that, we'll get into some pro moves for steering the conversation, and finally, we'll pull it all together into a toolkit you can start using right away.
Okay, first things first, you've got to understand that in France, a good debate is basically an art form. This isn't just a coincidence, it's deep in the culture. It comes from this long history of philosophy and an education system that really values clear, persuasive arguments. So it's not really about winning an argument, it's more about exploring an idea together. It's actually a sign of respect and engagement. Now, where do we start? Well, it might sound a little strange for a debate, but the most powerful place to begin is actually with agreement. Finding that common ground right at the start shows you're actually listening, and it builds this foundation of respect before you even think about introducing a different point of view. So, let's talk about l'accord, agreement. This is so much more than just saying yes. You should think of it as a strategic tool. When you agree with something someone says, you're creating rapport. You're validating their point, which, trust me, makes them way more open to hearing what you have to say next. And here are some of your go-to phrases. You've got a range of options here. You can keep it simple and direct with Je suis d'accord. Or, if you really want to show enthusiasm, you can go with absolutely. And for really strong validation, Vous avez tout à fait raison is perfect. Think of these as your keys to unlocking the conversation. And you can just see how smoothly this works in a real chat. Someone says, French cinema is booming. Instead of just a nod, the other person jumps in with absolument and then adds to it. Just like that, they've made a connection and made the whole conversation stronger. All right, let's get to the real core skill of any great debater, disagreeing. This is where the magic really happens. In French culture, challenging someone's idea is often a huge sign of respect. It proves you're genuinely engaged with what they're saying.
So the secret sauce is this concept of les désaccords polis, or polite disagreement. This is not about starting a fight, it's about intellectual curiosity. It's the art of separating the idea from the person, which lets you challenge a point without making things personal or tense. It's a really, really valued skill.
Now, let's look at some key phrases. Just notice how gentle these are. Je ne suis pas tout à fait d'accord means I don't entirely agree. It leaves all this room for nuance. And something like je vois les choses un peu différemment, I see things a bit differently, is so soft and personal. These phrases signal you're about to change direction, but without slamming on the brakes.
I mean, look at this. The difference is night and day, right? On the left, c'est stupide. That's a conversation killer. It's an attack. But on the right, je ne partage pas cet avis. Well, that's an invitation. It's about your perspective, not their intelligence, and it keeps the door wide open for more discussion.
So let's see it in action. Imagine someone makes a huge claim, like technology isolates us. Instead of just a flat no, the response is, I see things a bit differently. And then it's followed by a counterpoint. See how elegant that is? It's respectful, and it keeps the debate moving forward in a really productive way.
All right, time for the advanced moves. Once you're comfortable agreeing and disagreeing, it's time to learn how to actively manage the flow of the conversation. This is all about taking control when you need to, but, doing it with grace.
I know, interrupting can feel so rude, but sometimes it's just necessary. This little three-step process is your best friend. First, you apologize. Then, you make your point really concisely. Something like, I would just like to add that. And then, this is the crucial part. You hand the conversation back. It's a quick, surgical move, not some hostile takeover.
Another superpower in these conversations? Knowing when to ask for clarification. And listen, this is not a sign that you weren't paying attention. It's actually a sign that you were listening so closely that you want to understand every single detail. It shows deep engagement, and it also stops you from arguing against the point the other person wasn't even making.
And this is such a pro move. Check it out. Someone says, we need a radical solution. I mean, what does that even mean? It could mean anything. By asking, what do you mean by radical exactly, you force them to be more specific, and that takes the conversation from these vague ideas to a really concrete discussion. It's a brilliant strategic move.
Wow, we have covered a lot of ground. From building bridges with agreement, to politely disagreeing, and even steering the conversation. So now let's pull everything together into one powerful summary that you can take with you.
This is that moment where everything we've talked about just clicks into place. This is the foundation that's going to help you become a much more confident speaker in absolutely any French conversation you find yourself in.
And boom, here it is, your French debate cheat sheet. This is your toolkit right here for every goal, agreeing, disagreeing, interrupting, clarifying. You now have a solid go-to phrase. Seriously, if you can master these four, you will be ready to handle almost any situation that comes your way.
So really, the only question left is, what are you going to talk about? It doesn't matter if it's movies, technology, or the best kind of cheese. You now have the tools to engage confidently and, most importantly, respectfully. The art of French debate, it's not a challenge anymore. It's an opportunity. So go start a conversation.
All right, today we're going to crack the code on professional French. If you've ever dreamed of working in Paris, Montreal, or Geneva, then using the right words can be your absolute superpower. Think of this as your playbook, giving you the confidence to own those crucial career moments.
Look, you've got the skills, you've got the ambition, but does the thought of a job interview or, leading a meeting entirely in French make your palms sweat a little? Hey, you're not alone. We're going to tackle that right now. So let's treat this as your personal toolkit. We're going to go over the key phrases and, maybe more importantly, the cultural need-to-knows so you can absolutely thrive in a French-speaking office. You ready to jump in?
First things first, the job interview. In French, that's l'entretien d'embauche. It's your first big test, and trust me, every single word counts. Okay, this is huge. Formality is absolutely key in a French professional setting. You always start with vous. This isn't just about grammar. It's a huge sign of respect. Using the informal tu or a casual salut right off the bat can come across as pretty disrespectful. So stick with bonjour monsieur or bonjour madame until they, and only they, invite you to be more casual. Let's break this whole thing down into 3 manageable chunks. If you can nail these 3 parts, you're going to come across as a polished, confident professional. So after your polite bonjour, you want to show that you're genuinely happy to be there. Try Je suis ravi de vous rencontrer. That means I'm delighted to meet you. Or a really great one is Merci de me recevoir aujourd'hui. Thank you for having me today. Simple, polite, perfect.
Now, when it's time to talk about what you bring to the table, be clear and confident. You can start with J'ai de l'expérience en to state your background. To get into the details, use Mes responsabilités principales incluaient. And if you really want to highlight a specific skill, you can say Je suis particulièrement doué pour.
Remember, an interview is a two-way street. Asking smart questions shows you're not just looking for any job, you're interested in this job. For instance, asking Pourriez-vous m'en dire plus sur l'équipe shows you're already thinking about being a team player. Or try something like Quels sont les plus grands défis pour ce poste? That shows you're strategic. Hey, you got the job? Awesome. But now the real work begins, right? The day-to-day stuff, like mastering emails and meetings. This is the heart of office communication. And you guessed it, just like that interview, getting the formality right in your emails is a total game changer for building strong professional relationships. So, a good rule of thumb, when you're writing to your boss or a new client, stick to the formal stuff. Open with cher monsieur and close with cordialement. But for colleagues you work with every day, a more relaxed bonjour Marie and closing with bien à vous is usually perfectly fine. This one is so important. Politeness is everything. Think of the conditional tense as your secret weapon for making requests. Just swapping the very direct je veux, I want, for the much softer j'aimerais, I would like, changes the entire tone. It turns a demand into a respectful request. It's all about that cultural fluency. All right, you've mastered emails. Now let's walk into that meeting room. How you participate in these reunions can really define your success. If you're the one leading the meeting, here's how you start strong. Commençons, l'ordre du jour est le suivant. It's direct, it sets a clear agenda, and it shows everyone you're ready to get down to business. Want to show you're on board with an idea? Je suis tout à fait d'accord avec cette proposition is your go-to. It's a strong, positive way to build consensus and keep the momentum going. So, how do you disagree without being disagreeable? It's a fine art, and this phrase is your paintbrush. Je comprends votre point de vue, mais pourrions-nous considérer? You show respect for their idea first, then you introduce your own. It keeps the whole conversation productive. And to finish things up and make sure everyone's on the same page, this is your go-to. Pour résumer, nous avons décidé de. It clarifies the next steps, and honestly, it's a great leadership move. All right, now for the big one, the presentation, or la présentation. This is your moment to command the room and really show them what you know. You know, the secret to a killer presentation is just having a clear roadmap. Kick it off with a simple intro. Use transition words like premièrement, ensuite, and finalement to walk your audience through your points. And then stick the landing with a strong conclusion and a confident opening for questions. And here's a pro tip. Don't try to sound like a dictionary. Seriously, clear and confident language is way more impressive than using a bunch of complicated words nobody understands. The goal is to communicate, not to show off your vocabulary. So we've covered the interview, the emails, the meetings, the big presentation. What's the one thing that links all of this together? What's the real secret? It really just boils down to one word: preparation. Real confidence isn't about being flawless or never making a mistake. It's about being ready. When you master these key phrases, you build a foundation that lets you stop worrying about the words and start focusing on your message. What you have now is a complete toolkit for those make or break moments in a French-speaking job. You are totally ready to make a killer first impression and build an amazing career. So the real question is, what are you going to do with this? What's that next big career goal you're going to achieve? Because the language isn't a wall anymore. It's the door. Now go open it.
All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to tackle one of the biggest challenges in mastering French, figuring out not just what people are saying, but what they actually mean. We're going to crack the code and start you on the path to becoming a true French communication pro. I'm sure you've been there, right? You're following along, you know every single word, but you walk away with this nagging feeling that you just missed the real conversation. It's super common, and trust me, you're not alone. Today, we're going to solve that mystery together. Okay, let's take this classic little phrase, "a pas mal." Literally, it just means not bad. But depending on how it's said, it could mean a lukewarm, meh, it's okay. It could mean, wow, that's actually really good. Or it could even mean, that's incredible. So, how in the world do you tell the difference? Okay, so our first tool in the Decoder Toolkit is all about understanding what the French call l'implicit. And really, it's the art of what is not said. It's all about reading between the lines. So, check out this little exchange. Person A asks, "Are you coming to the party tonight?" And person B replies with, "I have a big day tomorrow." So, what's the real answer here? They never said yes or no.
And there it is. See, person B never actually says the word no. They just give a reason that leads you to that conclusion. And this is so key in French culture. Often, the stated reason is the answer. It's actually a really common and polite way to say no without saying no.
So, how do you spot this in the wild? Well, here are your decoder clues. Keep an ear out for those indirect answers. You know, when someone gives you a reason instead of a straight-up yes or no, that's a huge red flag. Also, listen for little phrases like en fait, which means actually, or disons que, which is like let's just say. They're often a little heads up that the real meaning is about to follow.
All right, tool number 2. And this one, it's a biggie, irony. It is everywhere in French conversation. And you know what? Once you get the hang of spotting it, it's actually a lot of fun.
So I want you to picture this, okay? It is absolutely pouring down rain outside, a total deluge. And your friend looks out the window and says, "What magnificent weather for a picnic."
It's a total mismatch, isn't it? The words are positive, magnificent weather, but the reality, the context, is completely negative. That, right there, is the heart of irony. They mean the exact opposite of what they're saying. It's a playful way to complain about the awful weather. So, your irony spotting checklist? It's pretty straightforward. First, look for that obvious contradiction between the words and the situation. Second, listen for super positive, exaggerated words like génial, super, or magnifique being used when things are clearly not so magnificent. And finally, pay close attention to the tone of voice. It might be totally flat, or maybe even a little overly dramatic. And you know, that last point about tone, it brings us perfectly to our final and maybe most important tool, tone of voice. This is where the real magic happens, because the exact same words can mean completely opposite things, all depending on how they're said.
Let's take a super simple phrase, c'est une bonne idée. On paper, it means it's a good idea. Simple enough, right? But is that what it really means? Well, let's have a listen.
Okay, first up, listen to it said like this. C'est une bonne idée. You hear that? The tone is upbeat, it's energetic, it's sincere. There's absolutely no doubt that the person genuinely thinks the idea is good. The words and the meaning are perfectly aligned. But now, what if you hear the exact same words said like this? C'est une bonne idée. Whoa, totally different feeling, right? That flat, hesitant, maybe slightly drawn-out delivery, it completely flips the meaning on its head. What they're really saying is, that is a terrible idea. So really, the best way to think about tone is like the emotional soundtrack for the words. It's the attitude and feeling the speaker brings, and it can either double down on their words or contradict them completely. It's a layer of meaning you just can't afford to miss.
So there you have it, 3 absolutely essential tools for going beyond the literal translation. And just like that, you are officially equipped to be a French nuance decoder.
Let's boil this all down into a super simple 3-step process you can use in your very next conversation. Step 1. Analyze the context. Is there a mismatch, like praising the weather during a downpour? Step 2. Listen to the tone. Is it sincere? Is it sarcastic? And step 3. Listen for those little clue words that signal you need to dig a little deeper.
And look, the reason this is all so important is because in French, just like in any language, the real conversation, the good stuff, the humor, the actual connection, it almost always happens in that space between the lines.
So the next time you're in a French conversation, give it a shot. Don't just hear the dictionary definitions. Listen for the context, listen for the tone, and hunt for those hidden clues. There is a whole new world of meaning just waiting for you to discover it.
All right, let's dive in. Today, we are cracking the code on what is, let's be honest, one of the toughest parts of learning a new language, actually understanding native speakers when they're talking at full natural speed.
You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You've put in the hours, you've learned the grammar, you know a ton of vocabulary, but then you turn on a movie or overhear a conversation and it all just washes over you in this big blurry wave of sound. It is so frustrating, and it can really make you feel like you're getting nowhere. But I've got some really good news for you. First off, it's not you. This is a wall that pretty much every single language learner hits. And the even better news, there is a clear, structured way to punch right through that wall. And that is exactly what we are going to break down today.
So here's the game plan. We're going to start by talking about why this native speed wall even exists. Then I'm going to walk you through this really powerful 3-step method. We'll cover step 1, which is all about building a safety net, then move on to step 2, the real test, and finish with step 3, the breakdown. And by the end, you'll see exactly how to go from just hearing sounds to actually understanding what's being said.
So, what is this big secret? Is it some kind of magic trick? Not at all. Think of it more like a workout for your ears. It's a proven, systematic technique designed to train your brain and close that gap between the slow, careful language you hear in a textbook and the fast, messy way people actually talk in real life. The whole method really just boils down to these 3 simple phases. First, you watch something with the subtitles on. Easy enough. Second, you watch that same thing again, but with the subtitles off. And third, you go back and analyze. You deconstruct the specific parts that you still couldn't catch. It sounds simple, I know, but trust me, it's incredibly powerful. Let's start with step 1, which we call the safety net. All you have to do here is watch or listen to something with the subtitles on, in the language you're learning, of course. And I know what you might be thinking. Isn't that cheating? Absolutely not. This is about building a crucial foundation. This process has a name. It's called scaffolding. What you're doing is literally building a bridge inside your brain. You're connecting those fast, new, unfamiliar sounds that you're hearing to the familiar, written words that you're reading. You're essentially creating a mental map, linking sound to text. And this brings us to the key difference between our first 2 steps. When you've got the subtitles on, that's the column on the left, your goal is just mapping sounds. It's more of a passive recognition. But the moment you turn them off, everything changes. Your goal becomes testing your recall, and your brain is forced to switch from just recognizing to actively listening. It's a way deeper level of processing. And that brings us to step 2, the real test. You've built your foundation, you've created that mental map. Now it's time to take off the training wheels. You're going to watch the exact same clip again, but this time, no subtitles. See, now your brain can't lean on the text anymore. It is forced to rely only on the audio. This is the real workout. And hey, maybe you only catch 50 or 60% this time. That is perfectly okay. That's actually great. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is to push your brain to do the heavy lifting on its own. Which leads us perfectly into our final and maybe most important step, the breakdown. This is where you get to be a detective. You rewind, you go back to those specific moments, those phrases that just sounded like a blur, and you figure out why. Why was that so confusing? Let's take a classic example from French. In a textbook, you learn to say this phrase just like it's written there, right? Je ne sais pas ce qui se passe. Every word is clear, distinct, but that is almost never what you're going to hear in a real conversation. In reality, what you'll probably hear sounds a lot more like je sais pas ce qui se passe. So what's going on here? Well, it's all about efficiency. Our mouths are lazy. We take shortcuts. As you can see, entire words get smashed together, sounds get linked up, and little unstretched vowels, poof, they just disappear. This isn't sloppy speaking. This is just how fluent, natural communication actually works. And this is the code that you are now learning to crack. So when you put all 3 steps together, what you have is a complete, repeatable workflow. It's a system that can take you all the way from confused hearing to confident understanding. And this isn't just a one-time trick. It's a method you can use for any song, any movie clip, any podcast, anything you want to master. So let's just recap the whole thing right here. Step 1, the safety net. You watch with subtitles to map the sounds to the words. Step 2, the real test. You watch without subtitles to test your pure, raw comprehension. And finally, step 3, the breakdown. You go back, you analyze the hard parts, and you deconstruct them so you can really learn. See how each step just logically builds on the one before it? So you see, the question isn't if you can understand fast native speakers anymore. The question is, how are you going to start?
you have the method right here. So what's it going to be? A scene from your favorite movie? That song you've been trying to figure out? The only thing left to do is press play. All right, let's dive into one of the most beautiful and, yeah, sometimes one of the most intimidating parts of the French language. We are talking about literary French. Have you ever had that moment? You pick up a classic French novel, you're all excited to read it in the original language, and then you feel like you've hit a wall. The words are French, but the sentences just look different. Well, let me tell you, you are definitely not alone. That feeling is totally normal. Today, we're going to pull back that curtain and decode this formal, elegant style. We're going to turn that confusion into a real appreciation.
So here's our roadmap. First up, we'll pin down what literary French actually is. Then, we're going to zero in on its most famous feature, the passé simple. After that, we'll touch on a few other cool stylistic tricks, and we'll wrap up by talking about why any of this still matters today.
Okay, so let's get right to it. What in the world is literary French? Well, the simplest way to put it is, it's the language of books.
The official definition calls it a formal, written style you find in literature and historical texts. But the most important part, the real key, is that last phrase. It is distinct from everyday spoken French. I mean nobody, and I mean nobody, orders a croissant using literary French. It exists for art.
A really good way to wrap your head around this is to think about Shakespeare. You wouldn't walk up to a friend and say, "Hark, what news," right? It's English, but it's a different register. It's the same exact idea in French, one style for chatting, another for creating timeless literature. And this example just makes it crystal clear. Look at this. In spoken French, you'd say, "J'ai vu," I saw. Simple. But in literary French, it becomes "je vis." And notice how the casual "on a parlé" gets elevated to "nous parlâmes." The meaning is identical, but the vibe, the formality, is on a whole different level.
And that brings us right to the main event. The star of the show, the famous and, let's be honest, often feared passé simple. This tense is the beating heart of storytelling in French.
So what does it do? It's a past tense, but it's a very specific tool for writers. It's used to narrate events that are done and dusted. Think of it as the engine of the plot. It says, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. It just moves the story forward with this clean, crisp authority. Okay, deep breath. I know a verb chart can look a little intense, but here's the secret. The goal is not to memorize this table. The goal is to learn to recognize the patterns. Once you start spotting those endings like it's, or aren't, a light bulb goes on. You'll immediately know, I'm in a story. This is literary French. It's like a secret code, and these are the clues.
And here it is, out in the wild, a classic example. Il vit, he saw, and cette lumière fut, this light was. It just sounds so final, so literary, doesn't it? It has this epic quality, like a story being told from on high. That is exactly the effect that great authors are going for.
But of course, literary French isn't just about the passé simple. Oh no, it has a whole bag of tricks, a whole toolbox of elegant devices that give it that unique flavor. So you'll also run into stuff like inversion, where they flip the verb and the subject around, like ainsi parlait-il. It just adds this dramatic flair. Then there's the infamous imperfect subjunctive, which is a whole other explainer for another day. And of course, authors will use a much richer, more sophisticated vocabulary. All these things work together to build that special atmosphere. So after all that, you might be wondering, okay, but if nobody actually talks this way, why should I care? And that is the absolute best question, because this is the most important part. Understanding this is your key to a much, much richer world. Look, the point here isn't to learn how to speak like you're in a 19th century novel. The point is about getting access. It's about unlocking this incredible treasure chest of art, history, and philosophy, and being able to experience it just as the author wrote it. So what can you do with this knowledge? For one, you can pick up books by the greats, Hugo, Camus, Proust, and read them without needing a translation. You can start to see why they chose a specific word or a specific tense. It's like seeing the brushstrokes on a painting. And in the end, you'll just have a much deeper, more complete feel for the entire French language. So the next time you open a French novel and you see one of those funny-looking verbs, don't see it as a barrier. See it as an invitation. It's a sign that you're about to step into a world that was carefully, beautifully crafted. The only question is, are you ready to step inside?
Have you ever felt that your French is, grammatically correct, but it's just missing something? That it doesn't sound quite right? Well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to crack the nuance code. We're talking about those tiny, subtle word choices that can take your speaking from just good to genuinely, naturally French.
Okay, so let's set the scene. Imagine this. A friend in Paris invites you over for dinner. You want to be a great guest, right? So you offer to bring a bottle of wine. Super simple, super common situation, but how do you actually say that in French? So you're faced with two options here. They both basically look like they mean, I'm bringing the wine. I mean, they're almost identical. But get this, only one of them is right. So which one is it? This right here, this is the exact kind of puzzle that separates the learners from the truly fluent speakers.
And that's really the thing about French, isn't it? It's a language of incredible precision. Nailing these little details isn't just about trying to avoid mistakes. No, it's about showing that you have a much deeper feel for the language's internal logic and its natural flow.
I want you to think of it this way. This is not just another grammar lesson, I promise. Mastering these little nuances, it's like learning a secret handshake. It's this subtle signal to native speakers that you're not just, translating words in your head. It shows you're really present and part of the conversation.
Okay, let's dive right in with our first case study. French has two super common words that both mean to know, savoir and connaître. They might seem pretty similar, but trust me, they are absolutely not interchangeable.
All right, first up is savoir. This one is all about knowing facts, data, or skills. You use savoir when you're talking about information you can learn or a skill you've mastered. Think of it as knowing that something is true, or knowing how to do something, like how to swim or how to speak a language. It's head knowledge. And then, on the other hand, we have connaître. This one is all about familiarity, about being acquainted with something. You use connaître for people, places, or things that you've experienced directly. See, you don't know a person like a fact, you're acquainted with them. You don't know a city like it's a piece of data, you're familiar with it. And here is where that distinction becomes crystal clear. You would say, je sais où il habite, because his address, that's a piece of factual information. It's a bit of data. You know the fact of where he lives. Now, on the flip side, you'd say, je connais Paris. Why? Because you're familiar with the city through your own experience. Maybe you've been there, you've walked its streets. You can't know Paris like it's a phone number. Here's a great way to remember it. Savoir is for the mind, but connaître is for the senses. Okay, ready for the next one? Let's see how this concept of nuance builds. This next pair is all about how French speakers see and talk about time, using the words an and année. And yep, they both translate to year. So an is used like a mathematical unit, a single point on a calendar. You use it for counting someone's age, 20 ans, or for specifying a particular year, like l'an 2026. But année, that's about the duration, the whole experience within that year. It describes the span of time itself, like a difficult year, une année difficile, or the whole year, toute l'année. So here's the really simple distinction. Just think of an as a marker on a timeline. But année is the actual story that happens between two of those markers. One is just a number, the other is a narrative. Pretty cool, right? All right, it's time to solve our dinner party problem. This brings us to our final pair for today, the two different verbs for to bring, amener and apporter. First, we've got amener. The secret clue is right there in the word itself. See that mener part? It means to lead. So you use amener when you are bringing something that can move all on its own, a person, a child, an animal. You are literally leading them to a place. And then there's apporter. And again, the root tells you everything you need to know. Porter, which means to carry. So this one is for all the inanimate objects, the things you have to physically carry with you. A book, a cake, a gift, or, you guessed it, a bottle of wine. So let's just look at these examples. It's so logical once you see it. You amène your friend or your dog because you lead them there, but you apporte the wine or gift because you carry it. It's this beautiful, simple logic hidden right inside the language. And there it is, the answer to our opening puzzle. You would tell your host, j'apporte le vin, because you carry the wine. But if you were also bringing a +1, you would say, j'emmène mon ami. See? Simple.
So you might be wondering, why do these seemingly tiny choices matter so much? I mean, people will probably still understand you, right? Well, yeah, but using them correctly signals a huge shift in how you're approaching the language.
Because this is really the key takeaway from all of this. It's the difference between just speaking French and actually thinking in French. You're no longer just swapping words from your native language. You're starting to use the concepts and the logic that's baked right into French itself. And the best part is, you can totally do this for any pair of confusing words you come across. First, just start to actively listen for patterns. Notice how native speakers use them. Then, try to figure out the core rule, like facts versus familiarity or leading versus carrying. And finally, practice with purpose. Make up your own sentences to really make that concept stick. So here's your mission, should you choose to accept it. Become a nuanced detective. Every French movie you watch, every song you listen to, every conversation you have, it's a brand new chance to spot these subtleties. Don't just hear the words. Investigate why that specific word was chosen over another. And that really leaves us with a bigger, more fascinating question. Learning these little distinctions doesn't just make you a better French speaker, it gives you this tiny window into a completely different way of organizing and seeing the world. So it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does the language you speak reveal about how you see everything?
You ever try to explain something just massive? I mean, something so complex, like an entire country, where you just don't even know where to begin? Well, today, we're going to tackle that exact problem. We're going to build a framework that you can use to understand, well, pretty much anything.
Now, seriously, think about it for a second. The history, the people, the food, the politics, I mean, all of it. Where would you even start? It feels impossible, right? But what if I told you there's a really powerful framework hidden inside just a single sentence?
So that's our mission today. We're going to take a simple request, a creative prompt, and we're just going to tear it apart, deconstruct it, and by the end of all this, you're going to have a repeatable system, not just for understanding a country, but for breaking down any complex topic you want to get your head around.
All right, let's get into it. Here's the roadmap for today. We'll start with what I'm calling the impossible prompt. Then we'll break down the 3 big pillars it gives us: culture, politics, and society. And finally, we'll wrap up with what I call the creator's toolkit.
Okay, so this is where it all begins. It all starts right here. This is the source material for our entire explainer. Just one single, kind of challenging request that, believe it or not, has the seeds of a brilliant framework hiding inside. That's it. That's the whole prompt. Create a documentary-style video exploring French culture, politics, and society. I mean, right away, it just hands us the 3 fundamental pillars we need to build our whole understanding. It's the entire foundation, right there in one sentence.
All right, let's start building this thing out. Pillar number 1, culture. I like to think of this as the soul of a place, you know? It's the flavor, the unique personality that makes it, well, it.
So what are we really talking about when we say culture? Well, you can think of it as the collective expression of a group of people. It's the stuff they create, the things they believe in, what they pass down from one generation to the next. It's all that shared stuff that makes a group, well, that group.
And here's the really cool part. None of these things exist in a vacuum. They're all connected. A country's language shapes its literature, right? Its values totally influence its art and its music. And its traditions, they define the food. To really get the culture, you have to see how all these pieces of the puzzle fit together to tell one big, coherent story.
Okay, so if culture is the heartbeat, then our second pillar, politics, is kind of like the brain. This is the system, the whole structure of power that governs how everything else works. It's basically how all the big decisions get made.
When you boil it all down, politics is really about 2 things: governance and power. It's that constant push and pull, that debate over who gets to make the rules and how the country should actually be run.
And here's the thing. To really get a country's politics, you can't just look at who's in charge right now. That's just scratching the surface. You've got to understand the system itself, the whole government structure. You need to know about the big historical movements that shaped it, the core ideas that people believe in, and of course, how that nation deals with the rest of the world.
And that brings us to our final pillar, society. So if culture is the personality and politics is the brain, then society is the body. It's the living, breathing structure of how people actually organize themselves and interact with each other day in and day out.
You know, the 2 big phrases to focus on here are ordered community and structures.
Society is all about the systems. Things like the education system, family structures, social classes, all the things that shape our everyday lives and how we interact.
You know, a lot of people kind of mix up culture and society, but this really helps make it clear. They're actually pretty different. Think of it this way. Culture is the what of a nation. It's the personality. Society is the how. It's the anatomy, the skeleton. And you absolutely need both to see the whole picture.
Okay, so having these three pillars, culture, politics, and society, that's a fantastic start. But knowing what to look for is really only half the battle. To get a truly deep understanding, you also need to know how to look. And that's where the Creator's Toolkit comes in.
And this toolkit is actually super simple. It's just 3 steps. First, you add some expert commentary. That brings in authority and a bunch of different viewpoints. Second, you define the key vocabulary, just to make sure everyone's on the same page. And third, you pose discussion questions. That turns it from just passively listening into actively thinking. It's a perfect recipe for real engagement.
And this is the real magic of it, right? These aren't just tips for making a video. They're practical tools for learning. For anyone who wants to learn or teach a complex subject better. Bring in other voices, define your terms, and ask good questions. It's that simple.
So let's put it all together. Here it is, the complete framework all born from that one little prompt. You've got your pillars, those are your core subjects. You've got your toolkit, those are your methods for making it all engaging. And what's the goal? A deep, comprehensive understanding.
So if there's one thing you take away today, I want it to be this. This framework, Pillars plus Toolkit, it's yours now. Think of it like a new lens you can use to deconstruct any complex topic. You want to understand a company, a new scientific theory, some big historical event? Start with the pillars, then use the toolkit to dig in deeper.
So really, that just leaves us with one final question for you. Now that you have this framework, now that you have this powerful new way of looking at and breaking down the world, what complex topic are you going to try to explain next?
Hey there, have you ever had that feeling with French where you know all the grammar, you've got the vocabulary down, but when you actually speak, something's just off? It sounds less like you're chatting in a Parisian cafe and more like you're reading aloud from a textbook. Well, today, we're going to figure out exactly why that happens and how to fix it by tapping into the real music of the language.
You know, this is a huge frustration for so many people learning French. It's not about getting every single word perfect. It's about that bigger picture, that overall sound that can feel like it's just out of reach. Does this hit home for you? You put together a grammatically perfect sentence, you pronounce every word as clearly as you can, but a native speaker, they still know instantly that you're not from around there. So why is that? It's because the secret isn't just in the words themselves, it's in the music that connects them all. And here's a massive clue as to why this is such a common problem. A survey found that a staggering 39% of French teachers in English universities, well, they never do exercises that integrate intonation. They're so focused on teaching the individual notes, they're completely missing the melody.
And this right here just reveals the huge disconnect. Take a look. 80% of teachers are laser-focused on correcting individual pronunciation mistakes, but less than half are consciously listening for the overall intonation, the melody. It's no wonder that the real music of French just gets lost in the classroom.
So, what is this music I keep talking about? Well, we can break it down into 2 really fundamental parts: intonation and rhythm. If you can master these 2 things, you are well on your way to unlocking a much more natural, authentic French sound. Okay, first up is intonation. The easiest way to think about this is just the melody of your speech. And in French, it is incredibly powerful. The very same set of words can mean completely different things, all depending on the pitch of your voice.
So, take this super simple phrase, tu viens. If your voice falls at the end, it's a statement, you are coming. But if your voice rises at the end, those exact same words suddenly become a question, are you coming? The entire meaning changes just from the melody of your voice. It's that important.
All right, now let's talk about rhythm. And this one is a game changer. In English, we have what's called a stress-timed rhythm. We punch certain syllables harder than others, right? Like, I went to the store to buy some bread. French is a completely different ballgame.
So, here's the crucial thing you need to get. French is syllable timed. What that means is that each little phrase, or rhythmic group, gets about the same amount of time, the same beat. So as you add more syllables, you actually have to say them faster to fit them into that same rhythmic slot. Let me show you what I mean.
Okay,
Imagine each phrase here has to fit into one single beat. A simple, two-syllable word is easy. Salut!
Now we add a syllable, so we have to speed up just a little bit to fit it into that same beat, si tu veux. And with 4 syllables, you've got to speed up even more. Comment ça va? Can you hear that flow? Salut, si tu veux, comment ça va? You're not punching any single word, you're just adjusting your speed to fit the rhythm. That, right there, is the secret to that famous flowing sound of French.
Okay, the final piece of this puzzle is all about how French speakers make their speech sound so incredibly smooth and connected, almost like it's all one long word. And this is where something called liaison comes into play.
So liaison is basically the art of taking a silent consonant at the end of a word and bringing it back to life, but only when the very next word starts with a vowel. It's the glue that bridges the gap between words, getting rid of those choppy pauses, and creating that signature fluid sound. But, and this is a big but, here's the trick. You can't just connect every single word. There are actually 3 types of liaison: the ones you have to do, the ones you can never do, and the ones that are, well, optional. Knowing the difference is absolutely critical to sounding natural.
Here is a classic example of a mandatory liaison. The S at the end of lay is normally totally silent, but because ami starts with a vowel, that S activates and makes a Z sound, linking the 2 words perfectly. Les amis. If you don't do this, it's a dead giveaway.
And on the flip side, you have forbidden liaisons. The word which just means and, is a great example. Even though it ends in a T, and the next word might start with a vowel, you never pronounce that T. Saying it alors is a classic mistake. And then, of course, there's the gray area, optional liaisons. With a phrase like pas encore, you might hear that S liaison in a super formal speech, or maybe on the news. But in a casual chat with friends, almost never. Using it just signals that you're speaking in a more careful, formal way.
So we've got intonation, rhythm, and liaison. How in the world are you supposed to practice all of this at the same time? Well, there is one incredibly powerful technique that brings it all together.
It's called shadowing. Now, this isn't about listening and then repeating. It's about speaking with them at the exact same time. You are literally trying to become their vocal shadow, mimicking not just their words, but the entire musical performance of how they speak.
Here's how you do it. It's super simple. First, find a short audio clip, a podcast, a news report, whatever. Next, listen to it one time just to get the general idea. Then, play it again and start speaking along with the narrator right away, trying to match their speed and melody exactly. And finally, and this part is key, record yourself and then compare it to the original. That's where the magic happens, because you'll immediately hear the subtle little differences in your own rhythm and your own intonation.
All right, so let's tie this all together. Getting that natural French sound really isn't about memorizing more words or cramming more grammar rules. It's about a really fundamental shift in how you even approach the language.
And this, right here, is the core takeaway. It's all about training your ear to hear the music that native speakers just take for granted. You have to stop processing French as just a series of words written on a page and start hearing it as a flow of rhythmic, melodic sound.
So I'm going to leave you with this question. The next time you listen to some French, I want you to try to tune out the individual words for just a moment and focus only on the rhythm, the changes in pitch, and the connections between sounds. What new patterns, what hidden melodies are you going to discover?
Okay, let's start with a really big question. How do you actually build a nation's future? The answer we're going to look at today, well, it's not what you'd expect. It isn't about economics or politics. It's found inside a document from a classroom in West Africa. I mean, it's a huge question, right? You could point to infrastructure, the economy, foreign policy, all valid answers. But for this explainer, we're going to zoom in on one country's very specific and, I think, pretty brilliant strategy. You heard that right. This is the story of how a teacher's guide, a simple document, is at the heart of a national plan to totally rewrite the future for millions of kids. It's a revolution, but one that starts quietly, in the classroom. To really get this, we have to start where every teacher there starts, with the official lesson plan. It's called the Fiche Pédagogique, and it is the fundamental tool for every single class, every single day. And when I say detailed, I mean detailed. This is not your average to-do list.
Just look at it. It's this highly engineered blueprint for every hour of teaching. It maps out everything, from what the students will be doing to the teacher's exact role.
So that's the real question, isn't it? Why go to all this trouble? To answer that, we need to zoom out, way out from this one document, and look at the national vision that kicked this whole thing off back in 2013. You see, that super detailed lesson plan isn't just about micromanaging teachers. It's the end result of a massive shift in educational philosophy. We're talking about a complete rethinking of what it even means to learn. The entire reform is built around this one big idea, the Integrated Pedagogical Approach, or API for short. Think of it as a whole new operating system designed to make education work better by changing how teaching itself is done. And at the very core of API is this really powerful theory called socio-constructivism. The main idea is simple but profound. People don't just absorb knowledge like a sponge. They have to build it. They construct it themselves by talking, by doing, and by working together. And that one idea creates this fundamental shift in the classroom. You go from the old way, the teacher's standing at the front just lecturing, to the new API way, where the teacher's job is to be a guide, a facilitator, who helps students discover and build that knowledge for themselves.
So the API runs on a few key principles. It's not just about what the kids learn, but how. It's about putting the student at the center of everything, making sure it's fair for all kids, and, this is crucial, connecting what they learn in school directly to their actual everyday lives.
Okay, so that's the big picture philosophy, but how does all that high-level thinking actually change what a teacher does, on a Tuesday morning in the classroom?
This table shows you the before and after perfectly. On the right, that's the traditional way. Recall the lesson, study the topic. Pretty passive. But on the left, you see the new API phases. It's a much more dynamic flow of presenting, developing, and evaluating. And it's all focused on what the students themselves can analyze and produce.
And suddenly, that complex lesson plan we saw at the beginning makes total sense. It's built to bring this new philosophy to life. Step 1, you present the topic to get them hooked. Step 2, you develop their understanding by giving them a real problem to chew on. And finally, you evaluate, not just what they can remember, but what they can actually do with that new knowledge. And that focus on what students can do, well, it doesn't just stop with teaching. It totally transforms how they're tested. And honestly, this might be one of the most revolutionary parts of the entire system. This is a game changer. The guide says, point blank, that the purpose of a test is not to filter students out. It's to help them. It's about figuring out where they got lost and helping them get back on track. That's what they mean by orientation and remediation. And to make sure that evaluation is actually fair, teachers are trained in this 3-step method. So instead of just slapping a grade on a paper, they first define what success looks like. Then they find concrete things to look for, and finally, they build a totally transparent grading grid that's often shared with the students. Everyone knows the rules of the game. All right, let's pull the lens back one last time. We've gone from a single, detailed page in a lesson plan all the way to the philosophy behind it. Now let's connect all these classroom details back to that huge national ambition we started with. So why do all this? For this. These are the ultimate goals listed in the guide. Every single student-centered lesson, every fair test, it's all designed to build these skills, to create citizens who are critical thinkers, who understand their world, and who are ready to contribute to it. I mean, this quote from the Minister of Education in the guide's preface, it just says it all, doesn't it? He's not talking about school. He's framing education as the literal operating system, the software that's going to program the entire country's future. And here it is, from the minute-by-minute structure of a French class all the way up to the software of society, this guide is a complete top-to-bottom blueprint for change. It's an incredible example of systematic, long-term thinking.
And that leaves us with one last thought. Diving this deep into Burkina Faso's educational plan really makes you wonder, right? Every education system out there is running on some kind of software, some set of unspoken rules and goals. And the real question is, do we even know what ours is?
Okay, let's be honest. We've all been there, right? You're staring at some super complex piece of literature, and the only instruction you have is analyze it. It's a feeling that can go from, well, confusion to straight-up panic pretty fast. But what if you could actually turn that panic into pure, persuasive confidence? Let's break down exactly how to do that.
You know the exact feeling I'm talking about. There's a blank page in front of you, a really dense poem or a tricky passage, and your mind just goes blank. It's such a common anxiety. But what if I told you there was a system, a way to crack any text wide open?
The French actually have a name for this whole exercise, le commentaire composé, and this definition is everything. See, it's not about finding some single right answer. It's a personal, argued study. Your job is to explore what makes the text tick, what were the author's intentions, what effect does it have on us, and what makes it so unique.
So the very first step is really just a mental shift. We need to completely reframe how we even approach the text. You have to understand that analysis isn't passive, it's an active investigation. You're not just reading for the plot, you're reading for clues.
Think of it like this. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to answer 4 key questions. First, what is the author actually saying? What's the core message? Then, how are they saying it? What literary techniques are they using? Third, why did they choose to say it that way? And maybe the most important one, what effect does it all have on you, the reader? How does it make you feel? This right here becomes your roadmap for literally any text.
And this is the exact mindset you need to get into. From now on, you are a literary detective. The text, that's your crime scene. The author's choices, every word, every comma, that's your evidence. Your essay, that's you building your case. Your whole goal is to solve the mystery of how this text works its magic.
Of course, every good detective needs a toolkit. So let's go ahead and open ours up and take a look at the practical tools you're going to use to gather all those crucial clues from the text. Think of these as your different magnifying glasses or lenses. You can look at the lexical level, that's just fancy for word choice. Then you've got the syntactic, how are the sentences actually built? Are they long and flowing or short and punchy? Then there's the rhetorical, metaphors, similes, all those figures of speech. And finally, the rhythmic, how does the text sound? Each one of these lenses reveals a totally different layer of evidence.
Now, for your secret weapon. This is a simple, super memorable acronym that's going to become the heart of your whole process. And make sure you're always analyzing and not just describing what's happening. It's called the CIA method. Let me show you how it works.
We're going to use this incredibly powerful opening line from Chateaubriand. I mean, wow. I was almost dead when I came into the world. It's dramatic, it's a paradox, it's just packed with meaning. Absolutely perfect for our little CIA investigation.
Here's the breakdown. First, you cite the evidence. You just quote the text, I was almost dead when I came into the world. Simple. Second, you identify the literary technique. So what's going on here? Well, it's an antithesis. You have this stark opposition of dead and came into the world. And finally, you analyze. So what? What's the effect of that? It creates this tragic, heavy atmosphere from the very first sentence. It frames the narrator's entire life as a struggle. See? Cite, identify, analyze. It takes a simple observation and turns it into a killer analytical point.
Okay, so you've used your CIA method all over the text. Your notebook is just full of clues. Now what do? I mean, you can't just throw a jumble of evidence at your reader. You have to organize it into a solid, coherent argument. You need a blueprint.
And this is the step that separates a pile of random notes from a genuinely persuasive essay. The goal is to group your best clues, your strongest CIA findings, into a logical structure that tells a story about the text.
And yeah, I get it. Choosing that plan can feel a little puzzling at first. There isn't just one magic formula that works for everything. But don't worry, the key is just to look at all your evidence and see what patterns start to emerge. What are the big ideas that keep popping up again and again?
So here are 3 of the most common blueprints. You could go thematic, where each paragraph tackles a different major theme. You could follow the structure of the text itself, analyzing it from beginning to middle to end. Or you could build an analytical plan, where each section focuses on one major literary device the author keeps using. There's no single right answer. The best plan is always the one that best shows off your discoveries.
All right, detective, you've got your evidence. You've got your blueprint. Now it's time for the final act, writing the essay and presenting your case to the jury, which is, your reader.
A strong case needs a powerful opening statement, right? Think of your introduction as having 4 essential ingredients. You start with a hook to grab the reader's attention. Then you introduce the text and the author. After that, you state what makes this text so interesting in the first place. And finally, you announce your plan, giving the reader a clear roadmap of where your argument is going.
Every single one of your body paragraphs is like a mini argument on its own. You start with your main idea for that paragraph, Then you build the argument explaining it, but you can't just say it. You have to prove it with a citation from the text. And here's the most important part. Don't just drop the quote and run. You have to analyze it. You have to explain how that evidence actually proves your point. See how this structure brings your CIA method to life in every paragraph? Now, for a more advanced tip, there are really two ways to make your case. You can convince, which appeals to pure reason, logic, facts, evidence. But the most powerful analysis also aims to persuade, which appeals to emotion. It's about using your writing style to make the reader not just intellectually agree with you, but to actually feel the importance of your point. The best arguments, they do both.
And finally, the conclusion. This is your closing argument, your mic drop moment. It's just two simple parts. First, the synthesis, a brief, powerful summary of your main points. Do not introduce new evidence here. And second, the opening. Connect the text to something bigger, another book, a historical movement, a universal human theme. That's what leaves your reader with a lasting impression.
So, here's the most important takeaway from all of this. Mastering literary analysis isn't just about passing a class or getting a good grade. It's about learning the fundamental life skill of how to build a clear, evidence-based, and persuasive argument about anything.
So there you have it. That's the whole process. You've got the mindset of a detective, the tools for investigation, and the blueprint for building a compelling case. You now have everything you need to move from that initial moment of panic to a place of real, confident persuasion.
So I'll just leave you with this one question. The next time you read a book, or watch a movie, or even listen to a political speech, what will you see differently? Now that you have the tools of the literary detective, what hidden messages are you going to uncover? Okay, let's talk about something that can feel, super intimidating. French academic writing. Whether you're working on an essay, a critique, or even a dissertation, there's this very specific logic, this structure that's expected. And today, we are going to crack that code and demystify the whole thing for you.
We've all been there, right? That dreaded blinking cursor on a blank page feels like a spotlight. And let's be honest, the reputation of French formal writing is a lot. It's seen as this incredibly rigorous, demanding thing, governed by all these unwritten rules. It can cause a ton of anxiety, but it really doesn't have to.
So here's the key. You got to shift your mindset. Stop thinking of it as a bunch of rigid rules you have to follow, and start seeing it for what it is, an architect's blueprint. Seriously. It's this powerful, logical system designed to help you build a really sophisticated, nuanced argument. And once you get the blueprint, you can build just about anything. Okay, so let's start with the absolute foundation. This is the single most important piece of any formal French paper, and it's called the problématique.
Now, here's the thing. A problématique isn't just your topic. For instance, if your topic is freedom in the 19th century novel, that's just a topic. Your problématique might be something like, to what extent does the pursuit of individual freedom inevitably lead to social alienation in 19th century literature? See the difference? It's a specific, debatable question that frames the entire intellectual journey you're about to take.
So how do you actually find one? Well, it's pretty much a three-step process. First, you just deconstruct the prompt. What are the keywords? What are the hidden assumptions? Then, you hunt for the tension. Where's the conflict or the paradox hiding in there? And finally, you turn that tension into a sharp, open-ended question. A strong problématique is like your compass. It makes sure every single thing you write is focused and has a purpose.
All right, so you've got your central question. Now you need the framework to answer it. And in French writing, this is the classic plan. It's the blueprint that's going to house your entire argument. And this is where we see a really crucial difference. A lot of us are taught to build a simple, linear argument, Point A leads to point B, and boom, conclusion. But the French model is often dialectical. It's more of a conversation. You present your main idea, that's the thèse. Then you actually challenge it with a counter-argument or complexity, the antithèse. The goal isn't just to prove you're right, but to resolve this tension with a much more sophisticated, nuanced idea, the synthèse.
And this is the full blueprint. Your introduction's job is to hook the reader and clearly state your problématique and your plan. The development section is where the magic happens. You build your case, you challenge it, and then you synthesize it all into a higher-level insight. And the conclusion? The conclusion is a total power move. It doesn't just rehash what you've already said. No, it gives a decisive answer to your problématique, and then, ideally, it opens the door to an even bigger question, showing why your whole analysis really matters.
So, you've got your question, you've got your structure, but how should it all sound? The tone of your writing is absolutely critical for establishing your credibility and authority. It's really the final piece of the puzzle.
The whole goal here is objectivity and logical precision. That's why you want to avoid personal stuff like I think. It keeps the focus on the argument itself, not on you. You swap out emotional words like amazing for more analytical ones. And this is so important. You use what are called logical connectors. These are not just fancy transition words. They're precision tools that show the exact logical relationship between your ideas, cause and effect, contrast, all of it. They literally build the scaffolding for your argument.
Just look at this example. Using par conséquent, which means therefore or consequently, does so much more than just connect two ideas. It establishes a direct cause and effect relationship. It tells the reader, hey, because of this first thing, this second thing is the logical result. It builds this unbreakable chain of reasoning that's so much stronger than just saying and.
So, you see, the whole point of this system, the problématique, the dialectical plan, the formal tone, it's not meant to restrict you. Far from it. It's a toolkit that's designed to empower you to build the clearest, most compelling argument you possibly can.
So let's just recap the 3 keys you now have in your pocket. 1, find your question, your problématique, to give your work a clear, unwavering direction. 2, build your blueprint using that incredible tes, antecedents, synthèse structure to get that depth and nuance. And 3, master your voice with a formal logical tone so you can present your ideas with real authority. These aren't just rules, they're the building blocks of powerful thinking. And so we end right back where we started, but now with a totally different perspective. That blank page, it's not an intimidating void anymore. It's a construction site. You have the blueprint, you've got the tools, and you have the keys to the code. So the only question left is, what are you going to build first?
So if you're learning a language, you know that big, kind of scary goal, right? Sounding like a native. It feels like the ultimate sign of fluency. But what if that whole idea is actually what's holding us back? Yeah, let's get into that.
I mean, we all chase this ideal of sounding native, but what does that actually mean? The path to get there feels so intimidating, and it's mostly because we're starting with a completely wrong definition of what success even looks like.
Usually our picture of fluency is, well, it's kind of robotic, isn't it? We imagine perfect grammar, zero accent, speaking in these flawless sentences pulled straight out of a textbook. It's this standard of absolute perfection that, let's be real, is pretty much impossible for most of us.
But what if we just threw that idea out? What if we shifted our focus from being perfect to being authentic? It turns out there's a kind of blueprint for sounding natural, a sort of secret code that's been hiding in plain sight this whole time. And you're not going to believe this, but the entire blueprint, the whole secret, is packed inside one simple, powerful creative prompt, a single clue that can completely reframe how we think about fluency. Okay, here it is. A prompt to create a video showing natural conversation. Now, look closer at those instructions. It doesn't ask for perfection, it specifically asks for fillers, pacing, and real dialogue. Think about that for a second. That's the complete opposite of the perfect textbook speech we're always told to aim for. So let's break down these 3 seemingly imperfect ingredients, because as it turns out, they are the 3 essential keys to unlocking speech that sounds truly natural and, well, native-like. These 3 elements are our steps to authentic speech. We're going to start by embracing the very things we're often taught to avoid, like filler words, before we move on to the actual rhythm of the conversation itself. First up, fillers. You know, in French, it's or ben. In English, it's or like. We're trained to see these as mistakes. But native speakers, they use them constantly. And why? Because that's the sound of a human brain actually processing information in real time.
So using fillers doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're thinking. It's a genuine sign that you're engaged in the conversation, not just reciting lines you memorized.
Next up, let's talk about pacing. You know, a real conversation isn't a race. It has a pulse, it speeds up, it slows down, and most importantly, it's full of pauses and hesitations. That right there is the real music of natural speech. And this gets at one of the biggest misconceptions about fluency. So many learners think they need to speak incredibly fast to sound native. But it's not about speed at all. It's about the cadence, the pauses for emphasis, the hesitation while you search for just the right word. That's what makes speech feel authentic.
And our final key, real dialogue. This is the exact opposite of those clean, predictable conversations you find in language apps.
Real talk is spontaneous, it's messy. People interrupt each other, they change topics, they circle back. It's just beautifully imperfect. So you can really see the two different models here. On one side, you've got that old ideal, perfect, robotic speech right out of a textbook. On the other, you have the reality of human conversation, which is built on our three keys: fillers, pacing, and real dialogue. The goal isn't to be a machine, it's to be a person.
So what does all this really mean? Well, it means we need to completely redefine what we're aiming for. It's a huge shift away from the impossible goal of perfection and towards something much more meaningful: connection.
Let's be really clear here. The objective is not to sound like a perfect carbon copy of a native speaker, to completely erase your own unique voice or accent. Chasing that kind of perfection only leads to anxiety and frustration.
Instead, the true goal is to be understood, to express yourself, and to connect with another person in an authentic way. It's about embracing the natural flow of conversation, imperfections and all.
Because when it comes right down to it, fluency isn't about being perfect. It's about making a connection. The moment you are understood, and you can understand in return, that is true fluency. That's the real win.
By focusing on fillers, pacing, and real dialogue, you're not just learning a language, you're learning how to be part of a real conversation. So the real question is, are you ready to stop chasing perfection and start embracing the beautiful, messy, and authentic reality of language?
Have you ever felt like your conversational French just hits a brick wall the second you step into a professional setting? Well, you're in exactly the right place. Today, we're going to unlock some of the specific, high-impact vocabulary that will take your French from just casual chatting to absolutely career-defining.
So, let me ask you straight up. Do you speak professional French? You know, there's a world of difference between ordering a coffee and, say, debating a legal contract or analyzing a company's finances. That gap, that's where your professional credibility is built. And we're going to start bridging it right now.
Okay, let's dive into our first area, the world of French law. Now, in this field, getting the words right isn't just a nice-to-have, it's everything. Every single word carries some serious legal weight.
So our first term is la jurisprudence. This isn't just about the law written down in some dusty old book. What it really means is the whole body of past court decisions and how they've interpreted that law over time. Think of it as the collective wisdom of the courts, and it's what shapes how all future cases are going to be decided.
And what's so cool about this is how it works in the real world. When a lawyer in France talks about jurisprudence constante, it's like they're saying, look, the record shows that courts have ruled this way again and again in the past, so you should probably do the same. It becomes the absolute bedrock of their entire argument.
Next up, la mise en demeure. This one sounds really formal because, well, it absolutely is. This is the official warning shot across the bow. It's a legally recognized letter that basically says, you need to fulfill your obligation, pay up, fix the problem, or we're going to court. It signals that the time for friendly chats is officially over.
And this example makes it crystal clear, right? Getting a mise en demeure for unpaid rent isn't just a simple reminder from your landlord. Nope, it's a formal, legal document that starts the clock ticking on a potential lawsuit. Knowing this term helps you understand the gravity of a situation instantly.
All right, let's switch gears completely. We're leaving the courtroom behind and heading straight for the boardroom. In the fast-paced world of French business, the language shifts from talking about rights and obligations to performance, growth, and the bottom line.
First up in the business world is le bilan, which is what we'd call a balance sheet. The best way to think about it is like a financial snapshot of a company. It shows you everything the company owns, its assets, and everything it owes, its liabilities, all frozen at one specific moment in time. It's the ultimate health check.
So whenever you hear someone discussing the bilan, what they're really doing is taking the company's financial pulse. And seeing a strong growth in assets, like in this example, is exactly the kind of healthy sign that investors and managers are looking for.
Okay, this next one is absolutely crucial. Le chiffre d'affaires, often shortened to just CA. This is the big one, the top line number. It's all the money that comes in from sales before you start subtracting any costs or expenses. It's pretty much the #1 way to measure a company's size.
And I guarantee this is one of the most common metrics you'll ever come across in a French business report or a news article. It's a headline number. That chiffre d'affaires tells you at a glance the sheer scale of a company's operations. Okay, for our last stop today, we're putting on our lab coats and stepping into the world of science.
Here, the French language demands incredible precision to make sure that research can be understood everywhere, with zero room for error.
You know, at the very heart of any scientific discovery, you'll find une hypothèse. It's not just a random guess. It's a smart, structured, and most importantly, testable idea. It's basically the brilliant what-if that kicks off the whole investigation.
And this is the term in its natural habitat. I mean, this is what science is all about, right? Trying to make sense of the world, especially when you get results you just weren't expecting. The hypothesis is the tool that turns a confusing mystery into a focused investigation.
Our next term from the lab is un échantillon, which just means a sample. You see, it's usually impossible for scientists to study an entire population or every drop of a substance. So what do? They take a small, carefully chosen part, the échantillon, to draw bigger conclusions about the whole.
And this example really brings home how important this is. Sometimes it's literally a matter of life and death. In medicine, that single échantillon of blood is what makes a diagnosis possible. The accuracy of the analysis on that one little sample can change absolutely everything for a patient.
So we've been through the courtroom, the boardroom, and the lab. But here's the real secret sauce to professional fluency. It's not just about knowing the words, it's about knowing which meaning of the word to use. When it comes to language, context is king.
I mean, just look at this. This example says it all. Take the simple word action. If you're in a business meeting, an action is a share of stock. You own a piece of the company. But if you walk into a courtroom, an action is a lawsuit. It's the exact same word, but you're talking about two totally different universes. And this right here is why context isn't just important, it's everything.
So, what's the bottom line here? What should you take away from all this? First, specialized vocabulary is your ticket to being taken seriously. The absolute best way to learn it is to see the definition and then see it used in a real-world context, just like we did today. And above all, always be aware of the professional domain you're in, because real fluency isn't just about knowing words. It's about proving you understand the world they belong to.
And there you have it. Some powerful new words to help you navigate the professional worlds of French law, business, and science. So the real question I have for you is, what's next? Using this approach, which professional world are you going to explore next? Thanks for joining me for this breakdown.
All right, let's get into it. Today, we're going to crack the code of French news. And I'm not just talking about translating words. We're going way deeper, uncovering the hidden meanings, the emotion, and, the persuasion that's packed into pretty much every article you read. So let's dive in.
You know that feeling, right? You're scrolling through the headlines, you get the basic gist of it, but there's this little voice in your head telling you there's a whole other story happening just under the surface, a story you're not quite getting. Sound familiar?
Well, guess what? That feeling is absolutely right. You are missing part of the story. But hey, that all stops today. Right here, right now, we're going to build your own media detective toolkit so you can start seeing what's really being said. Okay, so first up in our toolkit is our first clue, the tone. This is all about the mood behind the words, right? The actual feeling the writer is trying to give you. So what even is tone? Well, it's the author's attitude, it's how they feel about the subject. Are they angry, excited, worried, sarcastic? You don't get this from the facts alone. No, you get it from the very specific words they choose to use. Check this out. It's a perfect example of what I'm talking about. On the left, you've got a super neutral statement. The government announces a reform. Okay, fact. But look at the right. The government imposes a controversial reform. Whoa. See the difference? The word imposes makes it sound aggressive, like you have no choice. And controversial immediately tells you, hey, people are fighting about this. The basic event is the same, but the feeling, the tone, is worlds apart. Awesome. Now that we've got a handle on tone, let's grab our second tool. We're looking for bias, what I like to call the hidden perspective. This is all about figuring out the point of view that's shaping the whole story from the get-go. And here's something you've got to remember. Every single source has a bias. Yep, every one. It's just part of being human. So the goal isn't to find some mythical, perfectly neutral article, because that doesn't exist. The real goal is to get really good at spotting the perspective so you can factor it in. So, how do we actually do that? Well, there's a simple 4-step check you can run. First, who's talking? What publication is this? What's their deal? Second, start hunting for those loaded words we talked about, the ones that pack an emotional punch.
Third, and this one is huge, ask yourself what's not there. Who didn't they talk to? What data is missing? And finally, step back and look at the framing. Is this story being presented as a crisis? A huge success? An injustice? That frame changes everything.
All right, time for our final clue, the one that ties it all together. We're moving beyond feelings and perspectives to look at the actual structure of the article. We're talking about the argument. Think of it like finding the skeleton that holds the whole thing up. You see, any article that's trying to persuade you of something is built around this core structure. There's a main point they want you to believe, there's the evidence they use to back it up, and then there's the conclusion they want you to walk away with. Once you see this framework, you can really start to see if their logic is solid or, full of holes. So how do we break it down? It's simple. You just ask 3 questions. First, the thesis, the claim. What's the number one thing they want me to believe here? Second, the proof, the evidence. What are they using to prove their point? Are they using facts, data, quotes? And is that evidence any good? And finally, the conclusion. Okay, based on all that, what do they want me to do or think now? And just like that, you've done it. You've gone from just reading the news to actually analyzing it. Seriously, with these tools, you now have everything you need to deconstruct pretty much any news story that comes your way. So let's do a quick recap of your new analyst toolkit. You've got tone to nail down the feeling, you've got bias to uncover the hidden perspective, and you've got argument to map out the logic. Those 3 things working together, they'll give you the whole picture, not just the surface-level story. So the next time you're reading the news in French, you won't just be seeing the words anymore. You'll be seeing the architecture underneath it all. The emotion, the perspective, the logic. You've got the tools now. You can see the hidden story. The only question is, what are you going to do with them?
Okay, so if you're learning French, listen up. I am about to share the single most important piece of advice that's going to totally transform your speaking from, awkward and clunky to sounding really natural. And we're going to start with a classic mistake.
All right, so picture this, right? You're in Paris. You're about to see the Eiffel Tower for the very first time. And you turn to your new French friend to say, I'm so excited. So your brain does that quick word-for-word thing and you say, Je suis excité. And your friend gets this really weird, uncomfortable look on their face. Why? Well, because you didn't say you were excited. You just announced that you're sexually aroused. Yikes. It's a classic mistake, but it perfectly shows the exact problem we're going to solve today.
So, why does that even happen? I mean, how can a sentence that's technically correct word for word be so incredibly wrong in what it actually means? This right here is the question that trips up so many learners.
Well, it all comes down to what I call the literal translation trap. And trust me, it's a habit we all fall into. It's probably the single biggest barrier between just knowing a bunch of French words and actually speaking French.
I mean, does this sound familiar? You've spent hours and hours memorizing vocabulary lists, you know the grammar rules, but when you actually try to speak, your sentences just feel like English sentences wearing a French disguise. If that's you, you're absolutely not alone. This is pretty much a universal experience for anyone learning the language.
So the big question is, how do we escape this trap? Well, let's get right to the solution. It's a really simple but incredibly powerful shift in how you think. You have to start thinking in ideas, not in individual words.
Seriously, this right here, this is the golden rule. I want you to memorize this, write it down, whatever you need to do. Your goal is not to find the French word for every single English word in your sentence. No, your real goal is to understand the idea you're trying to get across, and then build that idea from the ground up using French tools.
So let's give this a name, right? We'll call it Idea First Translation. What it really means is just taking a step back. Before you even try to say anything, you have to first get a grip on the core feeling, the real intent, the picture in your head that you're trying to share.
Okay, so how does this actually work in the real world? It's basically a 3-step mental process. First, you ask yourself, what do I really mean here? Step 2, and this is honestly the hardest part, you have to completely forget the English words you're about to use. Just let them go. And then step 3, you ask, how would a French speaker express this idea? Then you build it from there, the French way. All right, theory is great and all, but let's actually see this thing in action. Because the difference between a literal translation and an idea-first one, it's like night and day.
Okay, let's take the phrase, I'm looking forward to it. The core idea here is that feeling of eager anticipation, right? If you translate it literally, you might get something really clunky like je regarde en avant pour ça, which just makes zero sense in French. So what's the French way to express this idea? It's j'ai hâte. It literally means I have haste. The words are completely different, but the feeling, the idea, it's exactly the same.
Oh, here's another one you hear all the time. It makes sense. So many English speakers will say, ça fait du sens, which is a perfect, direct copy of the English structure. A French speaker would never, ever say that. The idea is just that something is logical, and so they say, c'est logique. That's it. Simple, direct, and 100% French. Now this next one, shows a really deep difference in how the two languages are structured. Think about I miss you. In English, it's simple. I am the subject, I am doing the missing. But in French, the whole thing is flipped on its head. They say, tu me manques, which literally translates to, you are missing to me. See the difference? It shows how the whole concept can change. You are the subject. You're the one causing this feeling of absence inside me. It's a totally different way of looking at it.
And okay, one last classic example. Asking someone's age. An English speaker's brain goes straight to, how old are you? And you might try to say something like, comment vieux es-tu? But that's not the French idea at all. They don't think about how old you are. They think about what age you have. So the natural, correct way to ask is, quel âge as-tu? It's a completely different frame for the exact same question.
Okay, so how can you start using this like right now? Let's turn this whole concept into a super simple tool you can use every single time you speak. Think of it as your new 3-step mental checklist.
From now on, before you speak, just take a second, pause, and run through these 3 questions in your head. Number 1, what am I really trying to say? What's the core idea? 2, how would a French person express this exact idea? And 3, this is the big one, am I actually building a French sentence, or am I just building an English one with French words slapped on top? Seriously, this little check will save you from the je suis excité mistake, and probably 1,000 others.
You know, making this shift from translating words to translating ideas, it really is the key to unlocking fluency. It's the thing that will make you sound not just correct, but truly natural. So I'm going to leave you with this question to get you started on that path. What is one common English phrase that you always use that you're now going to stop and rethink before you try to say it in French?
Hey, welcome back. So look, if you're here, I'm going to bet your French is already pretty darn good. You can hold your own in a conversation, you get the subtleties, you feel confident. But what if we could take it to that next level? We're talking about that final polish, you know, that little something that separates the merely fluent from the absolutely flawless. That's what we're going to do today.
So here's a little challenge for you. You think your French is pretty much perfect. Well, let's see. This whole thing is basically designed to poke at those deep, subtle bits of knowledge, the kind of stuff that usually only clicks after years and years of living there. Let's see if we can find 1 or 2 of those tiny, almost invisible cracks to patch up. You game?
All right, let's get right into it. We're going to look at 3 specific types of mistakes. And these aren't beginner mistakes, not at all. These are the super subtle, super common errors that even really advanced speakers make. You know, the kind of slip-up that won't totally derail a conversation, but man, if you fix it, your French is going to sound so much more authentic.
Okay, first up, deceptive preposition pairs. We're talking people versus places. This is a classic trap that I see all the time, even with super advanced learners. Okay, take a look at the sentence, J'ai visité mes parents ce week-end. Now, on the surface, this looks totally fine, right? It's a direct translation of I visited my parents this weekend. Makes perfect sense. But there is a sneaky little error hiding in there. Do you see it?
So what's wrong with it? Seriously, take a second and think. The verb visitor, it feels so right. But nope, it's actually meant for something totally different. And getting this right, this is exactly that final 5% we're talking about. And boom, here's the fix. When you're talking about visiting people, the phrase you need is rendre visite à. So the sentence should be J'ai rendu visite à mes parents. See that? It's a whole phrase, not just one verb. And nailing that little detail, it just instantly makes your French sound so much better.
So here's the rule, and it's actually pretty simple once you get it. Visitor is for places. You visit the Louvre, you visit Paris, you visit a museum. But for people, you rendre visite à your friends, your family, your grandma. Just burn that person versus place distinction into your brain, and I promise you'll never get it wrong again.
All right, next section. Let's talk about the subjunctive. Oh yeah, the subjunctive. The final boss for so many French learners, right? It's not just about memorizing all those weird endings. The real trick is knowing when to pull it out. And the secret, as we're about to see, all comes down to one thing: certainty. Okay, check out this sentence. Je ne pense pas qu'il est en retard. Again, sounds pretty reasonable. I don't think that he is late. The verb here, est, is just the regular old indicative. But that first part of the sentence, je ne pense pas que, that's a huge clue that something else needs to happen. So here's how it works. When you say something like, je pense que, I think that, you're basically stating a belief. You're pretty sure about it. That's why you just use the normal indicative, il est. But the second you make it negative, je ne pense pas que, well, now you've introduced doubt. And doubt, my friends, is the magic key that unlocks the subjunctive. So it becomes il soit. So just remember this simple trigger. If you're certain, if you believe it, stick with the indicative. But if there's any doubt, any uncertainty, especially with negation, you've got to switch to the subjunctive. The right way to say it is, je ne pense pas qu'il soit en retard. It's a tiny change in the verb, but wow, it shows you really know your stuff. All right, let's move on to our third and final trap, the infamous faux amis or false friends. These are the sneakiest words in the language because they look exactly like English words, but they mean something completely different. And let me tell you, these can lead to some of the most dangerous and honestly, most embarrassing mistakes you can make.
And here we have it. Maybe the #1 most famous faux ami of all time. You're super pumped about a concert, so you say, je suis très excité pour le concert. I mean, it seems like a perfect translation of, I'm very excited for the concert, right? Wrong. So wrong. So, what is the big deal? What are you actually saying when you use the word excité to describe yourself? I'll give you a hint. It has absolutely nothing to do with being enthusiastic or looking forward to something. And there it is, the word excité. Its most common meaning when you're talking about how a person feels is sexually aroused. Yep. So, as you can imagine, this is a pretty high-stakes mistake. It's one you're going to want to scrub from your French vocabulary like yesterday. So how do you actually say you're excited about something? Well, you've got a couple of great, totally natural options. You can say, j'ai hâte de voir le concert, which basically means I can't wait to see the concert. Or you could say, je suis impatient de voir le concert. Both work perfectly, and more importantly, they'll save you from a very awkward moment. And just to drive the point home, here's another quick one. The word actuellement. It does not mean actually. It means currently or right now. If you want to say actually, the phrase you're looking for is en fait. See? Just another one of those little details that makes a world of difference. So that's a wrap on our 3 big ones. And again, none of these are rookie mistakes. Think of them more like fine-tuning. These are the little tweaks that take you from just speaking French really well to speaking it with, real precision and elegance. It's all about putting that final shine on a foundation that's already solid. So let's do a super quick recap, kind of like your checklist for reaching that next level of mastery. Number 1, people versus places. It's rendre visite à for people, visiter for places. Got it? Number 2, certainty is your guide. If you're certain, indicative. If you're doubtful, subjunctive. And number 3, always be suspicious of words that look a little too much like English. Double check those false friends. Okay, so as we finish up, I want to leave you with a question. Out of these 3, which one are you going to focus on eliminating this week? Just pick one. I'm serious. Committing to fixing just one of these will make a noticeable difference in your French, like right away. Thanks so much for diving in with me, and never stop polishing that incredible skill you've built.
All right, so if you're watching this, I'm going to guess you're an advanced French speaker, and you've hit that final, super frustrating wall, right? You're fluent, but you're not flawless. Well, today we're going to talk about how to shatter that C2 ceiling. And spoiler alert, it's not about more grammar drills. It's about a total mindset shift. So let's just dive right in with the big question. Why does this final level feel so impossible?
So yeah, let's talk about that feeling, because it's real. Why does C2 feel so out of reach? I mean, you can have a really complex conversation, you can totally understand the news, but you still feel like you're missing something, right? That last, 5%? You know what I mean. You don't always catch the subtle jokes or the cultural references or just that effortless flow of a native speaker. It kind of feels like you're on the outside looking in. Yep,
you've hit the C1 plateau. And trust me, you are absolutely not alone in this.
Okay, so to get past this thing, we've got to understand what we're actually up against. What is the real difference between being, functionally fluent and having true mastery? It's smaller than you think, but it's also way more profound.
Take a look at the shift in language here. On the C1 side, it's all about function, right? Understanding, expressing, handling situations. But C2? Look at those words: culture, subtext, nuance, effortlessness. The leap from C1 to C2 isn't really about cramming thousands of new words into your brain. It's a fundamental shift. You go from using the language like a tool to, living inside it. It's like the difference between knowing a recipe and actually being a chef.
So how do we make that leap? Well, I can tell you the answer isn't in another textbook. It's a complete change in your whole approach. It's about building what we call the immersion mindset. And the goal is actually pretty simple. You're going to build your own little France, right where you are.
And let's be super clear on what full immersion actually means. This is not about, watching a French movie on a Saturday night. It's a complete lifestyle shift. The idea is to stop having a separate French time in your calendar. Instead, you're going to weave the language into the very fabric of your everyday life.
This right here, this is the goal. We want to make French the default soundtrack to your life. The point is to get where hearing, reading, and even thinking in French isn't a conscious choice anymore. It's just your default setting. The music you listen to, the news you check in the morning, the GPS directions you follow, it all just becomes part of your own French world.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. That sounds great in theory, but what does it actually look like day to day? Like, how do you do this when you have a job, a family, a life? Right, so let's get super practical. We're going to map out a blueprint you can literally start using tomorrow.
So we'll break the day into 3 simple, totally manageable parts: the morning kickstart, the midday integration, and the evening wind down. Let's do it.
First up, the morning. That first hour of your day really sets the tone for everything else. So our goal here is simple. Make sure the very first language you interact with is French, not your native tongue. This one thing immediately flips the switch in your brain and gets you into the right mode.
And you can start with 3 really simple swaps. Okay, first, switch your phone language to French. I'm telling you, this is an immediate game changer. All of a sudden, just checking the weather exposes you to practical vocabulary. Next, instead of your usual English news podcast, swap it for something like France Info. And while your coffee's brewing, just scan the headlines on Le Monde. See, these aren't extra tasks. They're just simple swaps.
All right, let's talk about midday. That part of the day where life gets crazy and all our good intentions just go out the window. The secret here is not about finding more time. It's about repurposing the time you already have. We're going to turn all that dead time into live practice.
Just think about all those little moments in between things. Your commute to work, that is a perfect uninterrupted block of time for a French audiobook or a playlist from an artist like, say, Stromae or Angèle. Got 5 minutes on your lunch break? Scroll through some French language accounts on social media. Oh, and here's one of my favorites. Change your GPS voice to French. Seriously, you will learn commands and directions without even trying.
Okay, and now for the evening. Let's be real. You're tired. The absolute last thing you want to do is feel like you're studying. And you know what? That's perfect. The whole goal for the evening is to make French a part of your relaxation, something you enjoy, not another chore. This is all about effortless, natural absorption.
So, look, if you're going to watch some Netflix anyway, why not make it a French series? Something like Call My Agent or Lupin. But here is the absolute key. Turn on the French subtitles, not the English ones. This is so important for connecting what you hear with what you see. Cooking dinner? Pull up a recipe video from a French YouTuber. And before bed, instead of mindlessly scrolling on your phone, just read one chapter of a French novel. Remember, it's about pleasure, not pressure.
So you've flooded your life with all this French input. You're listening, you're reading. It's awesome. But there is one final, absolutely crucial step. Because hearing and reading, that's only half the battle. To really, truly achieve mastery, we have to flip the switch. We have to go from passively consuming the language to actively producing it.
Most people stuck at the C1 level live right here, in this massive world of passive input. You listen all day, you read, you understand a ton, but to break through that plateau, you have to intentionally, consciously increase your active output. That's the speaking and the writing. This is what forges the connections in your brain. It's what takes you from just knowing a word to truly owning it.
And look, this does not have to be scary or overwhelming. You can start so small. Just narrate your daily actions to yourself in your head. Bon, maintenant je vais me faire un café. Find a language exchange partner online for just one 30-minute chat a week. That's it. Or start a journal where you write one sentence a day in French. Or just leave a simple comment on a French YouTube video you watched. Every single tiny act of creating language builds that muscle of active fluency.
So after you do all this rewiring of your daily life, what's the real payoff? What's the prize at the end? What does it actually feel like to be on the other side of that C2 wall? Let's talk about the promise of what's waiting for you.
At the end of the day, C2 mastery is that moment when you finally stop translating in your head. It's when you can hear a sarcastic joke and get it, not just because you know the words, but because you feel the tone. You get the cultural context. The language stops being this foreign thing you're studying, and it actually becomes a part of you. It's a really deep, really satisfying connection.
Look, the path from C1 to C2 isn't one giant, impossible leap. It's really just a series of small, consistent, intentional choices that, over time, completely change the soundtrack of your life. And that process, it can start right now. So my question for you is simple. What's your first step going to be? Don't even think about the whole blueprint. Just pick one thing we talked about today, one tiny change. Are you going to switch your phone's language right now after this is over? Are you going to find a French playlist for your drive tomorrow? Your immersion begins with that single first step. So, what's yours going to be?
So, you're thinking about taking on the DALF C1 or C2 exam. That's a huge step. And, it's okay to admit it can feel a little intimidating. But I want you to think about it differently. This isn't just a test. It's your chance to really showcase your high-level French skills. And with the right strategy, it's not just something you can pass. It's a challenge you can absolutely conquer. So let's break down the game plan. Here's what we're going to cover. We're going to walk through every single section of the exam, piece by piece. We'll start with listening, move to reading, then writing, and finally speaking. And we'll wrap it all up with a killer checklist that'll have you walking into that exam room feeling confident and ready to go. All right, let's dive right into the first major hurdle, Section 2, Mastering Listening Comprehension, or as it's called, the Compréhension de l'oral. This is really your first big chance to prove you can follow fast, complex, real-world French, just like you were born to it. So what does this actually look like on exam day? Well, you've got about 40 minutes. In that time, you'll hear two kinds of audio. First, a longer piece, maybe an interview or part of a conference. The good news? You get to hear that one twice. But then you'll get a series of short clips, think news flashes, ads, that kind of thing, and you only get to hear those once. Your job is to catch it all, the big ideas, the tiny details, and even the speaker's attitude or tone. Okay, so how do you even begin to tackle this? It really boils down to a smart 4-step strategy. First, use that preview time you get to read the questions before you listen. This is a game changer. It means you're not just listening blindly, you're actively hunting for specific answers. On that first listen of the long track, just focus on the big picture. What's the general topic? Who's talking? Then, on the second listen, you go in with a magnifying glass, grabbing all those details. Finally, write your answers down, keeping them short, sweet, and to the point. And this brings me to a golden rule from the examiners themselves. Precision is everything. You have to answer the exact question being asked, not what you think you heard or what you want to talk about. If the question asks why something happened, you better explain the reason, not just describe the event. It's a subtle difference, but it's crucial. Okay, moving on to Section 3, Decoding Reading Comprehension, the Compréhension des écrits. Now the challenge shifts. You're no longer just listening. You're trying to decode really dense, high-level texts, and all while that clock is ticking away. So here's the setup. You've got 50 minutes, one long, complex text. We're talking somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 words, so it's hefty. And then a whole set of questions. But these aren't simple what happened next questions. No, they're designed to make you dig deep into the author's arguments, the way the text is built, and all the little nuances in the language. And here is probably the most important pro tip for this section. Time management is everything. Let me be clear. You are going to come across words you don't know. It's guaranteed. The secret is not to panic and not to get stuck. Use the words and sentences around it to make an educated guess about the meaning, and then you just have to move on. Keeping your momentum is the key to finishing this section on time. All right, let's switch gears and move on to Section 4, Crafting Your Written Production, the Production écrite.
This is where you get to stop analyzing other people's work and start creating your own. It's your turn to show off your command of French by building arguments and synthesizing ideas. Now, the first task here is often the one that trips people up the most, the synthesis. This is not your average summary. You'll be given a few different documents, and your job is to find the common ideas and themes between them and present them in a totally objective report. And here's the number one rule, the one you cannot forget. Your opinion has absolutely no place here. You are a neutral reporter, that's it.
You're really wearing two completely different hats in this section. For the synthesis, you're that objective journalist I mentioned. But then, for the second part, the essay argumente, you completely flip the switch. This is where your opinion isn't just welcome, it is absolutely required. You need to build your own argument with your own point of view and support it logically.
Now, no matter which task you're doing, the process should always be the same. And I cannot say this enough. Please, please do not skip step 1. That first 10 to 15 minutes you spend just planning, that's the most important part of this whole section. Outline your introduction, your main points, your conclusion, get the skeleton down before you write a single complete sentence. It makes all the difference.
And here's a little secret from the people who will actually be grading your paper. They are not looking for you to be the next Victor Hugo. They value clarity above everything else. A simple, well-organized argument written in clear, correct French will always get more points than a confusing essay that's just trying way too hard to sound academic. So relax and focus on structure.
So, you've listened, you've read, and you've written. Now comes the final challenge, the one that can make even the most confident speakers a little nervous, the oral production. How in the world do you deliver a polished, flawless presentation when the pressure's on?
This brings us to section 5, owning the oral production. And I want us to reframe this right now. This is not some scary interrogation. Seriously, think of it as an opportunity. It's your chance to have a really interesting, high-level, intellectual conversation in French. This is your moment to shine.
So here's the breakdown of how it all works. You get a full hour to prepare. That's your strategy session. During that hour, you'll read a few short documents and plan out an 8 to 10-minute presentation, which is called an exposé. After you give your presentation, you'll have about a 15-minute discussion, the entretien, with the examiners, where you'll get to defend your ideas and expand on your points.
So how do you make every second of that prep hour count? It's simple. First, read through the documents and figure out the central question or problem they're all circling around. Then, just like with the written exam, you create a clear plan. Intro, arguments, conclusion. Find some specific examples from the text to support your ideas. And here's a pro tip. Write out your first sentence and your last sentence word for word. A strong start and a strong finish leave a lasting impression.
And when you get to the discussion part, remember what the examiners themselves say. They want to have a real conversation with you. Listen carefully to what they're asking. If you don't understand, it's okay to ask them to clarify. Treat it like a genuine exchange of ideas. They're trying to see how you think on your feet, not to catch you in a trap. Wow, okay, we have covered a ton of ground, from listening all the way through to speaking. So let's bring it all home with our final section, a clear checklist to guide you in your final weeks and days of preparation. So here's what it all comes down to. 1. Know the format of every section inside and out. 2. Practice with real past papers. There is just no substitute for this. 3. I'm going to say it again. Always make an outline before you write or speak. 4. Focus on clear, logical structure, not on fancy, complicated words. 5. Get French media into your life every single day. 6. Practice under timed conditions to get used to the pressure. And finally, 7. Learn those key transition phrases, the connecteurs logiques, because they are the glue that holds all of your amazing arguments together.
Look, you have the complete roadmap now. You know what to expect and how to prepare for it. Passing the DALF, it's about more than just a piece of paper. It's about opening up an entire world of new possibilities for your career, for your education, for your life. So the only question left to ask is, where is your fluency going to take you next?